We have a lot to talk about. Cognac, gin, rum, Caribbean distilleries, floating barges with maturation warehouses built into them. But let's go right back to the start. What was your childhood like, and how did you become introduced to spirits and alcohol?
Well, it's always, you connect the dots afterwards, and I think I do now at my age, but I grew up on a farm, small farm, polyculture, south of Burgundy, so wine, and a little still, Alambic-ambulant, the ones that moved. And, but we also had cattle, and so I grew up in this with my grandparents. My grandparents raised me with my cousins, so 6 kids on the farm. In a small village, 70 people lived in the village. Third of the village were my cousins. That's why I have 6 fingers. And so this is the way I grew up. And, so for me, that relationship with the land means a lot, In my first encounter with spirits, I remember all my life, I have all fingers. You see, this one was sewed back. And so, I'm very handy. I can fix a lot of stuff. And that thumb, you see, is longer than the other one, was caught in a huge farm door in stone. So it was all crushed there to fix it. It's still a bit funny. And why I'm telling this is that when you were hurt, when you were a kid, you were given a foolproof Mar de Bourgogne. And so my first encounter is 9 years old. I'm like, imagine this thing, there was blood everywhere. My fingers totally, exploded. And my cousin slammed that huge farm door in the hinge, So imagine stone and big oak door. So the thumb was, very thin. And so I'm hurting and it's there. And then you have to go to nearby hospital. And of course, my great aunt is there and she gives me like a shot of, now I know, 71% alcohol.
Is this going in your mouth or on your thumb?
In my mouth.
In your mouth, okay.
And so of course it burns inside. I mean, you're a kid, know. And
yeah. I mean, that's going to burn most adults.
Few minutes after that, I'm flying and I don't hurt anymore. So she was right.
And the rest is history, a lifetime in spirits.
I'm not advising these treatments, but remember, I'm remembering this. And my first counter production, like just a year later, my grandfather was like, I'm the kid and so on. I'm going to show the kid how to distill to my grandmother. And they argue, a little bit. I mean, very stern guys. They went through Second World War the hard way.
Of course.
And what happens is that he says to me, hey, I'm going to show you distillation. And I go next to that still. Now it looks small, but I thought it was big still. And I'm there. And there's grape must. You know how you make Mar de Bourgogne? It's like grappa, right? You're in a farm, you don't waste anything. Leftover, when you press the grapes, you have that must, and there's still sugar in it. So the old days wouldn't let anything to waste. So you water it, and it creates, and then there's a pile there on the tarp, and he said, first, you taste Mar de Bourgogne with your ears. And I'm thinking, the effect in my throat, I said, he's going to pour this in my ears, man. Like you're a kid. And he says, shh. And I'm like, what? He's like, I said, I don't hear anything. He said, that's the point. Your raw material has to be fresh. If you hear insects buzzing, it's corrupted. And, I think in retrospect, like I told you, later on, I think it defined a lot of what we do together as a team. And, because why do I grow juniper berries? Maybe because of this. I mean, yes, I remember these long Saturday afternoons planting everything you can imagine. And he doesn't talk, so I'm in the fields. When he got older, he said, I'm not sure you're going to take the farm. So we planted pine trees on hilltops, stuff like this, long days. But to me, growing what we distill is very meaningful. So Citadelle, we're starting, okay, we're going to plant juniper berries. Cognac on hilltops has juniper beetle trees because the juniper berry was a food ingredients when spice were so expensive. Think about civet de lapin. When you make rabbit, you use that. Beautiful pâté, you have the sauerkraut, you still have juniper berries. So it was a food ingredient. So always that's around. And just to tell you this, that's to give you a little background. And that's my first exposure. And of course, I felt distilling. There's a magic to distilling. There's a French poet that says the art, le rôle de l'artiste est de gourmander la nature. The role of the artist is to make nature delicious. And I think they were thinking of distillers because there's no, see, we're surrounded by bottles here. We got quite a few that I brought as well.
A few new ones,
in my
yeah.
suitcases going to San Pancras. And, there's a farmer growing here in our case, most likely it's us, but growing something somewhere. And I do have a problem when there's not somebody growing something somewhere in a spirit. And sometimes when there's artificial stuff in it, that's I think where I draw the line.
Why do you think you gravitated towards spirits more than wine?
It's a great question because I grew up in the wine country and my cousins went to, with the enology. We've been making wine since kids. To me, spirits has that magics, that extra steps. When I got a little older and I wanted to piss off my grandfather who didn't say anything when I said, to me, wine is an unfinished product. And, say that to Burgundian.
No, I bet. Yeah.
To Burgundian is like, exactly. He thought Bordeaux was already, and so, but yeah, think about it. When you wine, you got grapes. When you got spirits, yes, cognac is grape. So to me, for him, cognac was his shining star. Cognac was it. There was always this big bottle, he bought it bulk, big bottle of cognac. And it was like, he's a distiller distilling Marc de Bourgogne, but also Fin de Bourgogne. Fin de Bourgogne, it's the wine that's distilled.
Okay,
so
it's a Burgundy brandy.
Yeah. It's a
eau de vie, is it aged?
Yeah, it is aged.
Yeah.
So I still have some actually from, and he did it by different regions, so like he had friends who had that little, and so the excess production of Alox Corton. So we got the beautiful distillates actually that are very old now and not much left, but it's, and so, yeah, to me, that magical was there. And then you can distill juniper berries and you can distill cane and then you can, so imagine, and I'm a creative guy, I know that now, you understand who you are after a while. And to me, that's the magic, man. You can do stuff that are, my job is really to just blow, for your taste buds to have a party.
When did you realize you wanted to be a distiller?
Yeah, it's later on. I knew I was going to do something related to farming for sure, but there's no money in farming. Some of my cousins went out of business. When people tell me farming, let me tell you, I know. I could fix a tractor. Now I can't anymore because there's so much electronics, but, we had to change pistons. We did. If you don't have, you do it, and so, it's to me, I knew this. And my grandfather's farm, he was really hands-on, I felt. So I thought I had to learn two things. English, because if you don't know how to speak, well, what you do, I think you're in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
And then, and I didn't speak English. And I wanted to learn business. I didn't know business. And if you don't know business, you can be creative. You can do anything. I always say, we have the heads and stars, but we have the feet on the ground, and the ground of what we grow, but also the ground. We meet every month, and we're making sure we're independent, and we're a community on a mission. We are the Ferrand. You met a lot of Ferrand team. You meet Hélène here. We're a team on a mission. I like to say we're a team of misfits on a mission. It's true. A lot of our guys, and so we created this world that we like to live in, and we'd love to have people join in. And then creating things. So to me was that. And then to finance my studies, I studied in America and Japan. Because to me, when you're in this tiny village, you're like, it was overcompensation, I guess.
Yeah, I need to go into the big wide world. Let's do America and
exactly that. And then so, USA, I remember there's the newspaper, on the table in the kitchen at the farm, and I see this ad. I'm 17 and a half. I see this ad about you can have working documents in New York for a summer, 3 days. I still have my social security card there, and work there. So I went to Manhattan, stayed at the YMCA, $24 a night, no AC. I was the king of Manhattan, I felt. And I found a job as a bar back, basically, a South,
you're a bartender.
South Street Seaport.
So you're a former bartender.
I served shots of vodka. I confess to, that's what I had to do in the early days to people going to trade in Wall Street.
Got to pay your penance before you can make the delicious stuff.
One day I mustered courage and I said, hey man, don't you want to, my English was getting a bit there. Don't you want to do it with cognac? And the guy looks at me and he's like, kid, I'm going trading. I don't want people to smell my breath, And I was like, oh man, that's what it is. And so, yeah, that was the early days. And then to finance my studies, I created a little company I had no luxury. I had to work and to help farm products exports. And, so wine, also hail billing system, to automate hail billing. I could tell you a lot about this. I don't think it's a day.
So you were a proper farm trader.
Yeah. But as to finance my studies,
Yeah.
and we did that, and I was cheap, and I was intense. I could meet all the people, and one of our customers was the Ferrand family. And and the Ferrand family is 3 branches and so on and so forth. And long story short, it's one of the lady, Mademoiselle, who's very inspirational to me, who's a godmother, kind of pointed me into like, yeah, you can do this because this is going nowhere. And so progressively, I invested, and I've been, cash poor since then.
What was the cognac industry like? This is 1989 that you acquired the Ferrand.
You're right. Yeah.
So what was the cognac industry like at that time?
It was out of a very a good period and going into recession, in term economically, because cognac has always had cycles. I wrote my first book was the history of Grand Champagne of Cognac. I'm not a good writer, I confess, but it's to me a great way to do 2 things: to organize your knowledge and also to say, man, I've learned a couple of things in my life. Maybe I'd love to share. And so. And you realize that cognac is very linked to geopolitics, hence what's happening now, because cognac is something that it's a small community of, at the time, disenfranchised Protestant community long time ago. And, they were given a choice in the early 1700s. You leave this country, you die, or you convert. And so a lot of these guys, of course, converted, not really, but left. And during French Revolution, 100 years later, there was in the village next where I live, there was 2,000 Catholics. Next day, free faith, 2,000 Catholic left. So why I'm telling you this is cognac is projected throughout the world, where people were sent away, and so that's why you find cognac at the corner of the world. But the other side of the coin is that when you have geopolitical problems, then like right now.
Is this Russia a big cognac market?
Russia is a big cognac market. USA is a big cognac market. China is a big cognac market.
Tariffs
but also South Africa, because there was a lot of Huguenots from cognac who moved to South Africa and so on, and Netherlands, and that was a part. But you are right. Right now, it's a big issue, and Ukraine, is a good, and God bless all our friends there. And so that's what's happened, in cognac right now. So that was that, and then but we're so small. In retrospect, we're still small. My grandfather said, never worry about anything. You're somebody's big guy and somebody's small guy. So just do what you feel is right. And that's been a guide to the rest of my life.
I like that. So let's drill down to cognac a little bit more. I remember when we first met nearly 10 years ago at Chateau Bonbonnet, I came up to your office with Paul Mafadjian, and you had maps all over your desk. You were poring over these old maps of cognac and showing me the borders between the different regions and explaining about how the British were part of how those borders were defined and kind of establishing different regions for cognac production. And you've since published a book called History of Grand Champagne?
You're right.
Yes?
Absolutely.
About the history of Grand Champagne region of cognac.
Yeah.
So what is so special about cognac region in general, and maybe you can break apart the different regions and obviously especially emphasize Grand Champagne?
Cognac is an expression of a terroir, in the deep sense. It's the land, is the people. Terroir is the land and the people. Remember early on we talked about the different methods of fermenting, rum. That's the people, that's culture, which is incredible in both, spirits. So yes, I was fascinated with this map because, again, think about these Huguenots travel and they come to the UK where they were welcomed, and then the British gentry embraces cognac back then. You're talking hundreds of years ago, and the people were there, introduced cognac and shared it, and then Great Britain took it in Hong Kong, everywhere, and you could also have that effect. But what they did, they were drawing the maps of flavors. Why they were not thinking geology; they were just saying, it's interesting, it tastes like this in here, and tastes. So these maps I was collecting, I was obsessed with this. Cognac was split at one point to 15 different regions of flavors.
Was it?
And it was fascinating because cognac was made famous with merchants that after that came back to the country. You know, the Hennessy's and so on. They're great.
It's a bit like with port, right? You have
Very much so.
exporters
Very much
who
so.
sort of define the
Very much so.
category and then end up
Yeah.
having, owning the
Very much so.
vineyards. Yeah.
What I find fascinating, and then you have a geologist, Cocon, mid 1800s, who's a geologist from, the term Jurassic. He coined it. So next time you watch Jurassic Park,
That's
think about
interesting.
drink a glass of cognac.
We have the Jurassic Coast there in the
Exactly, you're right. So that's and so this.
No dinosaurs there though. I've
No,
looked.
not left. But he's from Saintes in the Cognac region, and he became like kind of this famous at the time in the intellectual circles. And he's like, I wonder about the taste map of cognac. Does it have any veracity geologically? And he spent over a year with a guy on the donkey, and they went and they did earth sampling, and they drew the geological map and overlapped it with the map that the cognac guys have drawn, and it overlapped in some areas in a very magical way. Yeah, and I found it fascinating. That's why I wrote a book about this. Well, my wife says the surest way to sleep without melatonin, so maybe it's a little too technical and boring, but I had so much fun writing.
That is amazing though, isn't it? Because I think sometimes the concept of terroir and spirits is downplayed. People say, oh, you have terroir in the grapes and the wine, but there's so many steps that come after that with spirits. You've got distillation, you're putting it in barrels, you've got blending, and all of these steps sort of really diminish the effect that the land is likely to have on the product. But what you just described there is proof that without any geological understanding, you can separate out the land of cognac by flavor, and it matches in some way with the geology.
Yeah, I think people did it with the trial and error all these centuries, and it's very true with the young cognac. But if you think, you're right, the effect of terroir, if we are technical now, is multiple. Because what they did is statistically, actually, we had a man called Nicolas who worked with us. A PhD thesis was that map, a cognac, and he realized that there's many key of entries. It's like a chef when they're using a raw material. The quality is very important, but he's going to transcend it. So that's why I do believe, look, I grew up as a Burgundian, so terroir, the country of terroir, the microclimat or terroir. But it's interesting that they're called microclimates. Think about it. So it's the land, it's the climate, it's the hands of man. Remember, the artist and men and ladies, of course. The idea of it's just the land, it's a fairy tale. It is humans. If you take vine and then you don't have any humans, there's barely fruits on it. You need to prune it so it creates fruits. So without that creativity, that interaction between humans and nature, you don't have any great spirit. So it's every step of the way, exactly what you said. Yeast. So is yeast part of terroir? We study. It's going to be my fourth book. I'm right now doing the art of the master blender. My third book is the effect of yeast, but also the local yeast. Why do they develop locally, and how can you use them to leverage your flavor, right? And so, probably not a page burner again, but
It's niche, but it sounds fascinating. I think, again, like you say, all of these elements, the humans, the local flora, the yeast, and how that, I just wrote a book last year on agave spirits, and seeing how the different yeasts, because a lot of it is wild fermentation, affect the flavor, and not just the yeast, but like the elevation of the distillery, and so the air pressure and how that affects the fermentation, the time of the year, of course, the temperature, and what the fermentation vessel is made out of. Is it a local wood? All these kind of things. It's myriad, when you start to delve into it, all these little intricacies that are either geological or geographical, I should say, I guess, and cultural, and you mix the two together,
So, and you're fully right. And that's why, I always say to the team when I train younger people working with me, you're building a house. So every stone or every brick counts. And the marketing guys will tell you that brick is so important, but it really is a lot of beautiful bricks that need to be chosen. And what you talked about, the atmospheric pressure is going to influence the way that same yeast is going to develop. So even if you zero in on the yeast strain, how do you define, what's the importance even of that yeast strain, left alone temperature and left alone acidity, or I have an old recipe from Stays West Indies Rum Distillery. We have that we use 1% of seawater.
Yes,
So
I heard
to
about
create
this.
a certain stress to the yeast. So all this, but this is the definition of terroir. Is that these people, and that's the part I find fascinating. You have men and women who dream of making something delicious for hundreds of years, and we're just walking in their footsteps and just carrying on the baton to the next generation. That's what we do when we wake up in the morning, and that's exactly that. And that's why I spend so much time researching it, is to learn my classics the same way great bartenders learn their classics to build on and then put their little footprint, and then it goes to the next generation. That's what we do.
Yeah, I think terroir is going to come up time and time again in this conversation. So just focusing on cognac regions, for someone who's maybe not totally familiar with cognac, they've maybe tried a few, but they're not really sure exactly what they're tasting. How do you think about the different regions of cognac and what it is that they give you in the glass?
Alors, so first of all, I think it is a reality, but the reality is self-fulfilling, because once you know, you're going to work toward that goal. I think so. It could be argued, but I'll give you an example.
Well, as in the producer will work towards it, or the consumer will start to perceive it?
Consumer. I'm sorry, the producer.
Yeah.
The producer. I'll give you an example. Borderie, it's flowery, it's a little bit of violety and so on. We can't help it. It's already a little bit there with the terroir, but you're going to use your yeast. You're going to do it in certain barrels. You're going to barrel at a certain proof, because it's that little thing there that could be totally killed, but you're going to just raise it up.
They play to their style so that they
yeah.
meet the expectations of consumers and they fit within there.
Or not necessarily. Originally was, who am I? You know what I mean? If somebody's got, a feature, they're going to want to bring it forward, right? It's not so much in the early days, so Grand Champagne, we can do it real quick. Grand Champagne, by the way, I hate the guys who call it that way, in the early 1700s, because it's called Grand and it's a tiny little region, which is actually smaller than the Petit Champagne. The French, we can be complicated with stuff like that. Yeah. So it has nothing to do with champagne. Sorry, guys, even though it's called Champagne. We know why now. I wrote a book about this. So Grand Champagne in the old days, and I could go in a lot of details, but in a nutshell, it means chalky soil. So Grand Champagne means great chalk. You got all that chalk. So you got that chalk bed. When you come next time, I take you to the Chateau de Bonbonnet, you'll see the house is built on it, and it acts as a regulator of humidity. So when it's very, very wet, it drains the water out, almost like a great quality sponge. And when it's dry, it's got that humidity. So the vine has a lot of minerals, a lot of water to draw from. So Grand Champagne, great chalk. Petit Champagne, small chalk, not as concentrated. Right, so it's not the size, it's not the Champagne's chalky soil. Champagne, the bubbly, has a chalky soil as well. So long story, there's a lot more intricacies, but that's what it is. So Grand Champagne's got that. Why it's very prestigious is because you develop a lot of intensity of flavors, smaller yields. You don't have a lot of deep earth. It's really that stone, and then not a lot of aggressivity. So very concentrated flavor, honey at a younger age, and then prune as it ages, then exotic fruit at the older age. That's why I knew master blenders, some have passed now, that used to actually buy rum barrels to underline these exotic notes and to play to that. Now,
do a bit of tropical.
Do this, you're in trouble, because it's not part of the
not
OC
allowed to,
since 1983, and I could argue that yes, some people think I'm a punk to say that, but people have done it. And 1983 is yesterday. Cognac is first expression.
Would you like to see that changed so you could?
I would,
yeah.
But I think not as a finishing, but as a double maturation, because it's not about putting it there. It needs to be digested. Look, I've done it. Yeah. The Renegade barrel, Ferrand, is to expose these old techniques that were magical, using a chestnut barrel and so on. But to go back to the taste, so Grand Champagne's got that. So the Petit Champagne would be this, but a bit downplayed. So not as much intensity, can be quite delicate and interesting. There's a Petit Champagne d'Archiac, that's like another Grand Champagne, a sub-region that the guys like me, we know exactly, And then the Borderies, that tiny little region, 2 or 3% of the vineyards. I love it. I have a little vineyard there, and we've been just aging for many, many years there. So soon we'll do a little release. It's breaking news. and it's got this flowery violet pear notes that are very magical. So you're gonna play to that as much because it's very magical. And Borderie, it's a blend of that chalk and clay. And we have this estate on a hilltop. When it's dry, you cannot plow. It's like a stone, because the clay is dry. And when it's the summer, the winter, your tractors, everything is flipping on it and almost sticks to your shoes. You're like elevated shoes, and so that's that. And then the fin bois, and it used to be forest or planted later on, have these nice orange skin notes, and they're very interesting. And then you have Bon Bois Bois Ordinaire, would be the same thing, more diluted down. And there's Bois Terroir, they were called like this in the old days. They're the island and the coast, and I love it too, because you have the influence of the sea and so on. So Cognac's got all these magics. But again, like I said, that's kind of, when a painter does first a pencil drawing before he paints his own painting, that elements we describe are that pencil drawing. And the paint you put on it could be there to magnify it, or you could actually erase it down.
Yes.
It's like that esquisse, as we say, that is there. And if you understand it, and that's why I research it, I can say, okay, what is that nature gives us that we can make shine with the colors?
Yeah. Nice. And then grapes. Are the grape varieties that are used in cognac distributed relatively evenly, or do certain regions favor certain grapes?
It's a great point as well. Now, cognac has zeroed in one grape variety, which is the Trebbiano, the Uni Blanc. And but cognac is native to 2 grape varieties, and every time I have a little cash, we root out an area and plant more of the Colombard. The French Colombard should be called the Cognac Colombard, really. It's from a little village called Colombe, right next to where I live, which means dove. And you go to New Zealand, they have great French Colombard grapes, and that actually comes from that tiny little village, and it's a lot of aromatics for cognac. And the Uni Blanc Trebbiano was planted because the original grape varieties that were in cognac before Phylloxera got wiped out. And people were looking for a grape variety that, they started looking at other varieties, and that's why the Colombard, late 1800s, was introduced. So the Colombard is this high acidity. We need high acidity, and then lower proof. Because remember, the concentration is not done by the grape. The concentration is done by the distiller, by this fermentation and distilling.
Why do you need high acidity?
First, mostly is to be able for the wine to stay
stable.
Because cognac, by law, is a vin naturel, natural wine, doesn't use any sulfites or anything. So the acidity is what is going to hold it together. And of course, acidity promotes, we talked about that, development of certain compounds such as, esters.
So this is partly, so it's esterification during fermentation, but it's also because you're going to harvest all your grapes, and it might not be for a few months until you actually get around to distilling that wine.
You're right. And that's why the law prevents you from distilling after the 1st of April, because cognac is quite cool in the winter, so it's almost a fridge.
Yeah.
And it's there, you have a high acidity, it's quite stable. And we learn to make vin naturel. We learn how to make wine that are stable without using any sulfite. Sulfite, and I think it's a good side of the law, is forbidden to make cognac because it's a volatile compound. It is in wine, but in the wine for cognac would concentrate with distillation.
Yeah, so distillation, what is there to say about cognac distillation? How is it unique?
I always like to say you create flavor with fermentation.
Yeah.
You select your flavor with distillation.
I say that as well. Maybe I got that from you.
I don't know. Maybe I got it from you. And then you polish it, you embellish it with aging. So that's I think is the steps. And so if you don't have the flavors when you ferment, if you don't have the flavors when you ferment, then you're not going to be able to do anything after that. You cannot create flavors that are not there. It's a romance. And I do agree. There's 2 types of master blenders: the guys who think the barrel is over 50% of what you do. And the guys like me who think it shouldn't be more than 20%, of your flavor. And we totally fundamentally disagree. And I think we do great products on both sides of the spectrum, but that's that. So distillation, you're going to choose from, what you've fermented, the flavors that you want. And that's the magic of a distiller. But a distiller, he should be called a fermenter more than a distiller.
Yeah.
If you come to cognac in 3 weeks, I can show you 90% or 85% what you need to know about distilling, really. And I know it's portrayed that because it's a mechanical activity.
Sure.
But to show you fermentation, you need 10 years.
Do you think that rule sort of stands for all spirits? That really distillation, although it's kind of the bit that we imagine when we think about spirits, we think about this copper pot, whether it's a an onion-shaped one in Scotland or an lembic-style one in Cognac, or a column still. We always think about that as the way in which this product's made. But do you think that across all spirit categories, actually the distillation is possibly the least important bit, and fermentation, maturation,
of course.
I mean, I guess it's slightly different with something like gin, where you're obviously distilling botanicals and
but still, your infusion with the gins, like what your brew, call it a wine in case of spirits, or your brew when I have a patent for making gin with Citadelle, progressive infusion, digressive proof. What do we extract? We put it in distill. Remember, you make an element of wine or brew before you distill. Your flavor is there. Now, you don't want everything. You're going to choose this and that and so on. Now, if you use a huge column, you're going to raise everything off and be mostly ethanol and water. But, that's why you choose. But if it's not there in the first place, you don't have it. So, yes, I think a distiller should be called fermenter. It doesn't sound as good, probably, on a marketing browser.
No, fermenter is it just doesn't have that PR clout to it, does it?
But I think it's too bad, I think, we have incredible knowledge, at Stays West Indies, in Barbados about fermenting. Incredible. I mean, second to none. There's a gentleman, Dario, that used to be a academic, who joined, took a 1-year leave to, he's a specialist of fermentation, never went back to academics, and he calls yeast his babies. And he's like, today they are a little bit sick.
The babies are misbehaving.
Exactly.
And then so feeding.
And I love it. And then so he's got his microscope. He said, I found another baby. I thought that was not there. And then so he said, we're gonna grow that one.
We've found a new baby.
And then so to me, that's the magic. And I think you'll see it more and more.
Yeah.
And of course, you see people realize that it's good for you. People well fermented. So I think it's important also in the human cycle. So I think maybe it's just me wishing.
In case you haven't heard, this is going to be the summer of the Paloma. It's a fantastic long tequila drink, the bedfellow of the margarita, citrusy, fresh, and incredible vibrant pink color. If you're going to make this drink, then you're going to need this from my sponsor, Fever Tree. Their pink grapefruit soda. Made with fresh, ruby red grapefruits, it adds that wonderful sweet, sour, and slightly bitter tang to a nice Paloma. Take yourself a highball glass, fill it up with plenty of ice, add a splosh of your favorite tequila, and then top up with Fever Tree's pink grapefruit soda. Finally, and most importantly, finish with a slice of pink grapefruit. Now, let's get back to the show. I remember the first time I visited Cognac, I was there with is it the BNIC?
Yeah, BNIC.
Yeah, and they used to do this thing where, I don't know if they still do it or not, you'd know, where they brought out from various different markets, they bring out a bartender, a journalist, a sommelier, author, something like that. Anyway, I was on a trip, this is 14 years ago. It was my first time in Cognac, and we toured around the place, and I was very lucky because the author I was with was Dave Broom.
Oh, nice.
UK.
I love Dave, yeah.
And obviously he's well known for his sort of whiskey writing and a bit of rum as well, and gin, in fact. And we were touring around and tasting stuff together, and in the warehouses and what have you. And he said to me that he thinks that the French are the best in the world at managing casks. There's no one does it better. And I was sort of blown away by this because I sort of considered him to be this whiskey guy and to sort of, admit that the French are the masters of all this. But then I sort of started to see all the different processes that take place in Cognac. The élevage, the, dosage, the marriage of all these casks, combining them together at different times. So maybe you can elaborate on what I've just sort of butchered there and sort of describe what it is like in a cellar in Cognac.
It's true. It's funny that Dave says that. I mean, he's so smart. He really gets it. Every spirit has like a forte, something that's their thing. I would argue, and look, I'm totally willing to be challenged. Nobody has the absolute truth, but rum has has an incredible knowledge about fermenting, which is so key in making. That's definitely, let's be personal, why I think rum is personally fascinating. There's something that's second to none, about this. I've learned so much. Cognac, for sure, the master blender. And it's interesting because you see in every region, you really have to observe who's the boss. If you go to Scotland, master distiller is the fancy guy, right? I think you would agree.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. They probably get most of the limelight. Yeah,
and he's going to kind of manage things. In Cognac is the master blender, definitely. And in rum, it depends which island. So in Barbados, in a very Bayesian way, master blender, master distiller are on equal footing. They work together. If you listen to this, that will explain a lot of the personality of what you're going to taste. Remember we said you taste with your taste buds, but also you listen. Early on, we said that. And so, yes, Cognac is a country that is a tiny little village of 20,000 people. Do you know how many companies are cooperage companies that are registered? And some that are just a guy fixing barrel? Over 130.
Wow.
Over 130 registered cooperage companies. So, and everybody, the French, it's like our cheeses. We have thousands of cheeses and everybody disagree which one is the best. And that's part of the fun part. And so every barrel, I know guys who believe in toasting the caps of the barrels, and the other guy says, no, we don't toast the caps. Toasting the caps is a more recent phenomena. The first guys who did it, I knew it, they did it in pizza oven as experimental. So, yes, there is, and we don't call it aging, we call it élevage. Élevage comes from, like you raise your children. I love the English word. And in French also, you élever les enfants, you raise the kids. So for us, it's not aging, it's elevation, élevage. So I think it tells you what you're doing, and probably comes with the fact that Cognac is very expensive to make, and you used to have 20,000 farmers with each their own little plot of land. Like my grandfather, they were called bouilleurs de cru. He was distilling his own crop. Cognac had a lot. I'm a bouilleur de cru. And so, what happened is that you had these few barrels, and you made love to these barrels because they were your savings. They look, somebody like my grandmother who raised me, she knew several currencies in France. There's one currency that didn't change, is aging Cognac. When you had cash, you put it into Cognac. And so that was a way. So you nurtured this, so élevage. So, when
I think there has to be more to it than that, though, because you could say the same thing in Scotland, right? You had loads of distilleries, you had most of them farms, most of them producing very little. They put it in barrels because they wanted to be able to store it. Then, of course, they found out that you put it in the barrel, you start to get flavor, and lo and behold, it usually tastes better. The same thing is true of rum. There used to be hundreds of sugar mills all around the Caribbean doing the same thing. They put it in barrels as well. It tastes good. Same thing in bourbon whiskey as well. We put it in barrels. Oh, it tastes a little bit better. But what you're describing in France is an obsession with barrels. It's a sort of craftsmanship. It's an artistry around the cask. So where do you think that comes from? Is it just an acute sense of what tastes and smells good, and that has to translate to delicious products?
I think it's, when I wrote, there's 2 points to your question. The first one is nature. We're in an area where there's, right next to Cognac, a beautiful forest, Limousin. And, if you're in an area where, you go to Scotland, there's not so much forest. If you go to the Caribbean, there's not a lot of old forest. There's none. And so, in fact, in my book, I have a whole part about any other type of woods. Mastic wood was used in the old days. There was, and why shouldn't we still be able to use them? And of course, mango, for example, and so on to fix barrels. But really, that was limited compared to the big Limousin forest, or the Tronchet forest a little further. So if you have to make barrels, you need a forest. And back then, transportation was expensive. People were very savvy with the environment. The environment was respected because it was expensive to hurt the environment. The problem is that now it's cheap to hurt the environment. People were used to ship barrels to the Caribbeans undone. So you could ship a lot of barrels in one container. But now it's so cheap to ship barrels. That's my little moment. They just ship full. So you're shipping air mostly. So you need a forest. And second to this, there is definitely a gastronomic approach to Cognac from the early days. And you find that in spirits, there's a turn in every spirit where they become gastronomical. And Cognac, it's a very early stage. Cognac is born out of a wine region that was a Roman wine region. I don't know if you read the comics Asterix.
Yes.
Unfortunately, it didn't happen like this. When the Romans arrived, they prevailed. But the good news, though, is that they didn't fight that long. Right away, the local Celtic people at Bonbonnet was a Celtic village. We have all the remainings underground. They said to the Romans, we'll make your wine. That's what happened in Cognac and Bordeaux and so on. And Cognac Bordeaux was the same Cognac region. And as the British and the people from Netherlands, the Dutch started traveling longer trips, they needed something that held. Remember, there was no sulfite in wines and stuff. So they introduced distillation, the Dutch. And it was distilled once on the coast. That was the early days of brandy. And the local cognac guys, again, this gastronomic approach, they say, what if we distill twice, and so they distilled twice, and that's when cognac was born, We think, in the late 1500s, 1550, first distillation, probably late 1590. So to answer your question, yes, you need a forest, and you need a type of oak to be able to do this. And then you need that gastronomic approach to it to say, we're going to make this and it's going to be delicious. And you see throughout history where cognac becomes, my book about the art of master blender, like the barrel is not just a container. The barrel is actually a tool.
Yes.
That's because before, for many years, was just a container.
Yeah, I mean, I often think when people say, today whiskey as an example, whiskey's made from three things, water, yeast, and barley. I'm like, well, it's made from wood as well, and in fact, for a lot of whiskeys, wood is the most important ingredient, I think it's, you can look at a cask as a storage device, but let's be honest here, as well as storing this product, it is deeply affecting its flavor.
Sure. Yeah. It's funny you say this because you made me think of something, is actually the region where you had all the oak, the barrel maker and everything, is the region where we measure the taste of wood to the lowest point. A cognac master blender, if it's over oaked, will not. We're like the Burgundians of spirits. We don't like the heavy wood extractions. We just don't, and it's just not our culture. And I must say, it's not mine in every spirit that I look at. And I do respect. I have discussions with people who make whiskey, and they say they will tell you more than 50%, but cognac not. For us, it's just little touches, and actually, we rarely use new barrel. When you have a new barrel, it's for 3 months. Then you transfer in an old barrel.
Move it out, yes.
And then, so we call fût the roux that are barrels with. I have barrels that I use that are 80 or 100 years old, but they've been restaved many times because we just want to add a little touch of wood. So a barrel, a master blender, I'm trained as a master blender, and the master, you know how to take apart a barrel and change 1 or 2 states because you want that little pinch of new oak. Or you recap the top. If you recap one face of a barrel, and if they're laying down, it's 12%, 11% of new wood. That's plenty for a cognac.
So you have these sort of patchwork quilt barrels where...
if you pay attention and you come visit our cellars, it looks like the barrels look like, they've been patchworked. There's no one barrel, we call them the zebras, that are not zebraed.
Or it's like an old lady who's had various limbs transplanted with a child.
Or little Frankenstein barrels that's sewed up, It's called restaving, this technique I'm telling you about.
Yeah.
So there's many terms about aging. For example, something we call tranchage. Tranchage was coined by a guy called Jean Monnet, was the father of Jean Monnet, or his grandfather actually, that created Europe, the concept of Europe. He was a politician. And he showed that the difference of temperature are affecting wine negatively. If it's too hot, you cook because wine is a juice. But cognac being a perfume, actually, when it's very hot, it pushes in the wood. When it's cold, it retracts it. And that tranchage helps the integration of tannins. He was a crazy master blender. I love that guy. He actually had a little manual elevator to put the barrels just underneath the roof to get the super heat and then bring them down. And then at one point, some guys tried to emulate it. They were warming their barrels. They got carried away. Remember the late 1800s? These guys were crazy. And so you don't have to do this. Nature does it for you. So this breathing of the cold and the hot, and actually Kentucky benefits from that, and some guys will say, I should temperature control my aging cellar. I'm like, absolutely not, man. Just that difference is called tranchage. So we coined that also.
So you like the idea that certain parts of the warehouse may be hotter than others, and then from a blending point of view, you get a broader range of...
But also you like the fact you got differences of temperature during winter and summer.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's what I'm talking about.
I say, so you don't want that consistency throughout the
Yeah,
year.
that's a big plus. If you have that, imagine when it's hot, it pushes into the wood. When it's cold, it retracts. When we ship back Planteray from Barbados and Jamaica in barrels, it goes through like cold and hot, and that's like extreme tranchage. Plus we have the movement, which is dynamic aging. And Cognac has terms about what we call fondu, with the integration. So we have a lot of terminology, but when something is super integrated, you feel that it's a whole. We always say 1 + 1 = 3.
Fondue, so it's referring to the sort of mixing and...
Melted together.
Yeah.
Like when you have a fondue with cheeses,
I might want a fondue now. We got a fondue organized here?
It's delicious for gin, by the way, fondue. And so, so that's that. You got all these terms, and that's why, for example, we have vats. So when you're with your aging, you're gonna few barrels. And we don't say, sometimes you go to a region and say, today we're dumping barrels. Well, in Cognac, we'd like to marry the barrels. And dumping and marrying, if you listen to us, not exactly the same, right? And so
one often follows the other. But
But blending these barrels together, you put them in a vat, and they marry. And then you prove down a little. You prove down very progressively.
Right.
And then that's how you do that. And then you redispatch, or you lead toward your bottling. That's why vatting is very important, for example, in Cognac, and important in rum. Vatting, if you look at the history of rum, vatting is crucial.
What strength do you tend to fill the barrels at?
That's a great question. And as you know, it depends, and I know you know. So your question is loaded. And, most people say, like 65%, right? That's kind of the classic answer. And the Cognac guy is going to say it depends. If you want to extract more tannins, it's a different proof that if you want to extract more the vanillin, sweet elements.
Yeah.
So the Cognac guy will know, okay, this I want to extract more. Also, depending on the age of your barrel. If it's a very, very, very tannic barrel, you don't want to extract too much tannins. So you're going to adjust your proof. So that's, of course, something very classic in Cognac making. That's one of the many leverage is called the barreling proof, and that we use, but also that we use for Planteray for sure. That's something where a lot of guys in the old days, if they didn't think about this, barreled at the highest proof possible because you don't need to use as many barrels and you don't need as much space.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it doesn't work for the flavors.
Yeah, it's different, isn't it? I think we should try some cognac.
Absolutely.
We've gone on long enough.
So you can start with the 1840 with this one. And so the 1840 is a cognac that I actually developed many years ago. I don't remember days, but many, many years ago. I collect a lot of things. I'm not a minimalist guy. My wife is like me, maybe worse. So we collect everything. You've seen the maps, whatever. So I collect one of my collection. I collect stills, for example. I have in an old barn, like beaten up stills. I have 30 of them now. And I collect cognac they were young when they were bottled, but they were made over 100 years ago.
Right, so it's sort of a real taste of the land and the grapes and
but
everything.
Also, how did they make cognac 100 years ago? That was more like this, because once it's bottled, it doesn't really move unless it's just put in
bad conditions or whatever.
So a lot of people would put it in their attic or whatever. And in Cognac, there is an auctioneer, a man who's a good friend of mine because I collect a lot of things. And so when an old lady, an old man died, no heirs or whatever, they sell off all the house. And some of these families been around for hundreds of years, hundreds of years. And every month there's an auction like
That's the dream, right? An old chateau that's having a clear out, and there's just a massive stash of like 18th century cognac.
It's these houses, estate houses. It's because remember there was 20,000 farmers. Now there's 4,000. The land is the same size, so you have a lot of consolidation. So when these old houses, and so for many years, especially when I was young, when there is an auction. There is Bruno, who's the man who's organizing it, and his boss, they're wonderful people. And they tell me, we discovered 20 bottles of cognac. The auction is that day, and I bet. So I got 100 bottles of very drinkable cognac. of course, I don't collect them. I drink them, in that sense. And I love that super concentrated, very extracted cognac. And the one I preferred was a Pinet Castillon from 1840, hence 1814 original formula from Grand Champagne, fermented in a way where you have a lot of concentration of esters and a higher, alcohol.
Were they fermenting differently back then in some way? Do you know?
Wild yeast, yeah, we know. A lot of wild yeast, and then they were fermenting a little longer, and there was a very high concentration. And I loved that cognac. And, it's funny because that's many years, and Dave Wondrich is a good friend. And I'm like, Dave, I'm working on this. Was the honor of my grandmother, because where I grew up, at the end of the day, she would do something that most people thought was totally wrong, is take a big snifter, you don't usually use more like a glass like this or a tulip-shaped glass, and put cognac at a higher proof. My grandfather would have bought bulk and put a big ice cube. And she used distilled water. And at the time, it was the purest water. I was like, okay. And, and she was like me, insomniac. She would read me books all night, like until midnight. And I always wondered, and I remember that smell when I talked to you, that smell of the cognac. And I wondered, and I only understood when I became a master blender or a blender that, we perceive the molecule of taste. It's important for listeners, the molecule of taste differently depending on their concentration. So so if you dilute down a spirit, you're not opening it up, or you're changing it. And so a spirit is a book. When we choose a proof, we give you that book open at a page that we think is a beautiful page. But when you're going to start drinking it, especially if you use, a bartender is going to use it, they're going to flip to the pages and they're going to go at that. Still, the book is there. So the idea is, because of that, so what you are doing instinctively, she was not drinking one cognac. She was drinking 20 cognacs. Yeah. Every sip would be a different flavor.
The ice dilutes a little bit.
Dilutes. Yeah. So your body perceives these molecules differently, right? Do I make sense?
And of course, you have temperature change
and
as well.
Of course as well. So that's another factor. But that main factor is really important. So I always thought, I wanted to make a cognac in her honor, where people, the old people used to use a little seltzer water in cognac. Cognac highball was the thing of the first part of the 20th century.
I sometimes theorized as well that when you hold a spirit in your mouth, you're adding a little bit of dilution there.
Right.
And so as you move it around, you're lowering the ABV, and of course you're exhaling, and the aromatics are changing at the same time. And it's part of obviously there's the tactile experience of the sort of heat of the alcohol and the pepper and everything as it stays in your mouth. But I mean, I don't know. I might just be making it up, but
no. It's only because yesterday, I was showing somebody a little bit of the Hogo Monster, and I said, dilute it down in your palate, to your point. So you see, that's exactly that. So I wanted to make a cognac in her honor, to say something you could dilute, it's still going to be there. Yeah. So, cognac by law is a minimum of 200 grams of volatile substances, congeners per 100 liter. This is 550. So it's extremely, plus it's at 45% alcohol, which is the multiplier of flavors. So just something you can drink on its own. So it's typical Grand Champagne, right? The honey, the pear, and I know it by heart. But as I was, cheers by the way, I was about to be finished with this, I called Dave Wondrich. It was a dead of winter. I said, Dave, you want to come? I'm finished finalizing. You see the grapes now? Raisin, grapes.
Some apricot or like stone fruit.
Absolutely, which is very Grand Champagne style. And so I said, I'm working on this cognac. I don't know. I'd like somebody who's, very able to look at it, And he came and we spent a week together, and he tasted all my 100 bottles that are, 100 years old, but 8 years old, because once in the bottle doesn't age anymore. And as he tastes, I'm thinking, man, what if he likes another one that I like? Maybe. And then he zeroes in on the one. It was incredible. And I'll always remember, because I showed him what I did and said, this is delicious. And he's making mint juleps, and he's explaining to me mint julep was one of the first cocktail ever, who used to be made with cognac.
Yeah.
And then
Sazerac as well, of course.
You're right.
Yeah.
And as he's about to leave, he's like, Alexander, and I had bought 3 bottles or 4 of the Pinet Castillon. It was in an attic in a case. And I remember there was somebody bidding against me, and I said, why are you buying this? He said, because I know you know what you're doing, so if you're buying it, I'm buying it. I said, why don't I buy it? I'm going to use it for this, and I'll give you a bottle, because I really wanted to afford it. And sharing.
Yeah.
And David, I remember, looks at me and says, before we go, I'd like to make a mint julep with the 1840. And I'm thinking, I think we made about 20 of them. And he was like, not from the barrels created, but from the original one. He said, remember, I'm a historian. I want to taste the historical mint julep.
I want to put history in my mouth.
Exactly. It's exactly that. And I'm like, okay. I say, well, 2 conditions. The first one, you don't make 1, you make 2 because you have a friend with you. We made taste history and he makes a good mint julep. And I say, second, you write the back label because you know what we did and I suck at writing and you're an incredible writer. So to this day, the back label was written by Dave and that was that. And I thought
I think the other thing as well, the third condition should be don't use mint from the 1840s.
We didn't think of that one. But think about it. You touch on an important point. If you're a chef, you read a recipe. Because, I love working with Dave. And Dave would call me and say, Alexander, pineapple rum. You don't make a pineapple rum. And I thought he was being funny because I never made flavored rum before. And I'm like, do you want me to make blue curacao while you're at it? I was trying to be funny. And he's like, no, but I mean it. And so when he reads a recipe and it's missing from like 1800s, 1600s, and he doesn't have the ingredients, he gives me a call. And of course, I'll make it for him. Or, or even a still. One day he's drawing on a napkin. We're in Spain, a still, and he has got these documents from China from the 1400s. And it's still made of wood and copper. And we are the only distiller I know. We have our own coppersmith. So Gaylor and his assistant. So we do everything by hand. So he said, you can make this and we can taste it. And he said, I have a drawing of a medieval still from France from 1500s. So I still have it, at the distilleries. There's little stills and we distill different things from it to see the difference between China and medieval time. I have to say in the 1500s, the Chinese did beat us totally.
Really?
Their still was so much better.
That's interesting.
I did actually a seminar at Tales of Cocktails about this. Angelique at marketing, she's saying, so what are we selling? And I said, I don't know, or just sharing. And so we did distillates with this, and we did a masterclass with that. So that was fun.
The Chinese still, I don't want to get too deep into the weeds on this because we've still got a lot to get through, but the Chinese still, was it an alembic style still, or did it operate?
It's so alembic, but it's the way you cool down that was different.
Was it a dish on top that cooled it?
And then I'll show you when you come.
Yeah.
Whereas the one, the medieval one was air cooled. So in the winter probably worked a lot. And
in the summer not so much.
It's like a big witch hat like this. And it's like this. And then there's a little gutter inside and the cool air would eventually put, in the little gutter inside.
Okay.
So in the end, it was so inefficient. We had to wrap wet cloths around it to do that, which they probably did to do that. It was not very, very efficient.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? When you're digging up an old still like that, you'll find the solid components like the wood and the metal, but you won't necessarily find the wet fabrics they might have wrapped.
No, you're right.
Or the wool or whatever it might be.
Yeah, and then maybe to put it in a draft. We tried to read more document. But, we love doing stuff like this. Is it to commercial purpose? Not quite. But
it's a taste of history, isn't it?
You end up being a better, knowledgeable person.
Yeah, I think understanding the context of where we are now by knowing where it was then is so important to all of this. Because it's never a static thing, right? I mean, mentioned already, cognac regulations, and we'll get into rum as well, that the way it is now is always deemed to be the right way. And these things are always evolving. They're always changing. They always have changed and they will always continue to change.
What you say is so important. I always tell people, I say, don't think tradition is just what you were doing when you were 20 years old.
Yeah.
But think about it. You think classic rock. So classic rock for me, I can tell you what it is, but that was really what I was listening when I was, from 14 to probably 22 years old, right? But a lot of people think tradition is what they did when they were in a learning stage. In your life, you're a learning stage, right? Post teenager. I've analyzed that because a lot of technicians I work with, when they define tradition, if it's not a really thought out process, in the end, it's going to be that. And then I think the beauty about spirits and why I create spirits, we're so lucky to have so many archives, and I make the Navy rum with, researching it with Matt Pietrek or the book on Grand Champagne. Why do I do this? It's just inspiration to create. Don't tell me when I see my friends who are bartenders and they look and they read old recipe books, they're getting inspirations. When they go and do guest shifts, That's what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to do guest shifts, in different distilleries, Central America and the Caribbean and South America until the end of August. You learn from there, and it's inspiration, and you're a better person. When we built that Chinese still, I was, just this size, and we're just learning, and we discovered the effect of cooling, for example. So this is the things that, but yes, it's never static. People would think this is the way it is. No, tradition is the true tradition is the addition of many, 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 many years. And today's innovations are tomorrow's tradition. We are still producing traditions right now.
Yeah.
And that's why our role is super important.
Just to finish up on cognac, a couple more bits. So, and this will sort of inform us a little bit when we get to rum as well. Dosage and boisé. What are these things in the context of cognac?
It's a dosage is the way, or in cognac sometimes called sirupage. It's an old tradition where people used to use the wine must of the grapes, sometimes honey, by the way, and to just a few pinch, and would introduce it in the cognac, barrel age it, and add a few grams. It's by law limited to 16 grams. Now it can be used with different type of sugars, the same way that dosage is used in champagne. Champagne does the same thing. And by the way, champagne can use also the grape must, to do it. And so that's the dosage. Why people did it in the old days, and it's funny because with time, actually, people made it a little drier and drier. And I think our palates are becoming a little drier, mine as well. But still, that little pinch of salt in the green beans that you're cooking, that little pinch of that elements. So now the way this is done, you toast it a little bit. In Caribbean, they call that browning, actually. I'm of the view that actually maybe we have learned this from the Caribbeans.
Really?
Yeah, I'm of the view. I don't have any written documents, but when you hear say how it is, and so you toast it, you create a browning slightly, and then you alkalize it.
So what are we toasting here?
The sugar.
The sugar.
So either from the grape must.
So you're toasting grape must sugar or just sugar.
In the case of rum, it's raw sugar, like Demerara and Demerara, or like Muscovado sugar. You need to have that very pure it's not pure in terms of stripped out, it's pure in terms of authenticity. And then you alkalize it. You just make kind of a alkalized syrup. But it's more liquid than the syrup.
How do you alkalize it?
You put cognac in it, if it's for cognac, or rum in it. And then you age it for a minimum 5 years.
So it goes in a barrel for...
Ideally, it goes in the barrel. Not everybody does it, but it goes in the barrel, ideally. And then...
So it doesn't have to be barrel aged. It can just sit there in an inner container.
Yeah, it could. Yeah. It could. And some people don't age it, But it's great to age it. Remember the fondu, so it's fully integrated. I don't know if you know this old champagne, the Brut, this because it's fully integrated. And then so it's a small amount that's been used, and it pop flavors, the same way pinch of salt in beautiful dish pop flavors. And of course, if you put too much salt, it tastes like salt. But if it's just a little bit, doesn't taste sweet at all. It's just got like this very small amount that's going to pop flavor. Now, it's been around for a long, long time. The greatest book ever written on spirits is it's a British book, The Royal Commission to Whiskey and Other Potable Spirits, written in 1908. And it's a bunch of laws, and they've been given the crown says, please define the next, like Scotch whiskey and Irish whiskey. Ireland was part of the empire, and they have unlimited budget, and so they invite distillers and blenders from the UK, but all over the world. So you have Monsieur Hennessy, Monsieur Haim, Monsieur, and then you have Cousin, and you have everybody comes, and you have this deposition. And so the cognac guys explain already these techniques there, and that's 1908, for example. It's great book. It's 800 pages, and it's a list of the position.
Do we know how far back it goes before 1908? I mean, were they doing this in the 18th century?
Yeah, I'm sure. Back then you'll see, when you see the use, when you see some of the old documents, from early on, it was done very lightly because, it's expensive process. And wine
sugar was fairly
available.
Expensive. Yeah, but further back you go, right?
But wine must
not so much. Yeah, you got plenty of that. Yeah.
So in that case, and then in rum, rum was invented in a sugar mill. So and of course it's the way. And then so that's dosage or sirupage, It's there's a maximum, which is like Brut champagne is 13 grams. In that case, it's 16 grams, because you don't want to taste it. It's about doing that. So when the regulation was put together, they said, no, it's done, but this is just to that limit. So much like a great champagne is done that. And at Maison Ferrand, we have some super dry expression, like you have the zero dosage champagne, or we have the ones where we did, and we put it on the label. We just tell you, I love that transparency. And when you taste it, the 19th century for sure had this very technical dosage, as you can see, and you got these honey notes that are totally brought forward. And when I train young blenders, I boil slightly green beans. And I have them taste it. And then I put a slightly
Bit of salt.
tiny pinch of salt from the Île de Ré, fleur de sel, but just a tiny little bit. And I say, which one? And I don't tell him. And I say, which one tastes more like green beans?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
And actually, the one with the pinch, it tastes more like green beans.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
It's a technique, master blenders, we call that mise en valeur.
Yeah, it reminds me of I remember, the chef Heston Blumenthal. I remember watching him do an experiment with, I think it was Firmenich or Unilever, one of the big flavor houses, and he'd gone to visit them, and they plugged like a machine into his nose, and they had him chewing gum, mint flavored chewing gum. And he was chewing and chewing on it. And as anyone knows who's had chewing gum, after a while, the flavor starts to go.
Of course.
Right? You can't taste the mint anymore. It's just a bit of rubber in your mouth.
Gone.
But what they did was they then just introduced a small amount of sugar to his mouth. And he didn't just get the sensation of sweetness, he got the sensation of mintiness. So the two were linked. You couldn't have the mintiness without the sugar. You have to have that there. And it was a really interesting sort of exercise in how when we think about flavor, it's the aromas, but also because of the way in which we've been trained environmentally, we often have to have a taste parameter to accompany that as well in order to fully experience that flavor.
Yeah, and then scientifically, we know that whether it's a pinch of salt, a pinch of, just is a
sugar, salt,
is a booster.
Bitter, whatever,
The problem is like all the good things in life. It's how much, and that's the it's how you use it. And the problem with sugar is a huge problem. Is people over refined it. So now you got this super night. All the listeners, just don't eat the white stuff and read the labels, because sometimes the brown stuff is white stuff that's been colored.
Yeah.
I'm like, man, don't do this. Don't do this. And then just use like an unrefined sugar. You go to Barbados, make sure you have a suitcase of sugar back, because this little sugar mill is one of the best in the world, and they still make this artisanal sugar. And my goal, I hope they continue this, making sugar. And it's just, you just need like a little bit, and it just pops your coffee or whatever, just a tiny little bit. And it's so flavorful. And so it's like anything in life, and each different origin has different flavor. You go to Guyana, luckily they're not closing the mill. I was with my good friend, Koma Samaro, one of the rum legend, is the head of Terroir distillers. And, we are partners in Jamaica and
Yes.
with the government. And so wonderful, and they have this beautiful, Demarara sugars. So yes, it's just how you use it.
Yeah, let's return to sugar and rum when we get to rum properly. So just to finish up on cognac, I'm interested to know how perceptions of cognac differ from within the cognac region and the people who live and work there and drink it to the rest of France, and then how that is different to the rest of the world. How do you sort of see its perception amongst those different sets of people?
Like how French people perceive cognac?
Yeah.
It has changed a lot in time. Until the Second World War, it felt totally ingrained in culture. I've researched that. It's interesting. You have Colette, which was my hero, is a French lady, French writer. And she was a cognac drinker and wonderful, one of the first, ladies to really assert her, her and herself, and be being such a genius to be fully recognized. And she loved cognac, and that was the Finalo time. The cognac Finalo is a cognac highball. So that was, people. When you go to a flea market in France, you see the seltzer bottle with the handle, that blue stuff with a pewter handle.
Yeah.
That was to drink cognac. People don't realize.
Yeah.
Seltzer water. So you have cognac, a little seltzer water, then you put an orange skin, and some people who had bitters, they put those
This
bitters.
is pre-World War II.
That's pre-World War
Yeah, because as you mentioned, I think you mentioned earlier, the cognac highball in the UK predates the whiskey highball. You know, until phylloxera, everyone was drinking
No,
cognac.
and Cognac highball is delicious. And we're trying to reintroduce it to say, man, this is part, in France, to say this is part of our. And then think about it. Second World War, which was very traumatic for the world, and for France was a question, identity question, right? We started by losing, right? And then the UK, thank you, by the way, helped, and America as well, of course. And so all these strong symbols of France, you know, suddenly the GI comes and they drink whiskey and you know, and you know, my grandfather was in like working camp concentration in Oriental Prussia and got freed by America. So that like changed the view on spirits. And to this day, Scotch whiskey and whiskey in France is still outselling cognac almost 10 to 1. 10 to 1. And so, you know, this is something that, but the good news is that I do a lot of master classes in France, and France loves rum, so it's always kind of an entry key. And I always have that little, you know, glass of cognac at first. I'm like, taste this first and tell me what you think. And they're like, this is not rum. I said, you tell me what it is. And they're like, this is delicious. I'm like, well, it's actually cognac to French people. And they're like, wow, like something like this, you know. And we have the SDA over there, you know, which is 25-year-old cognac aged in a humid cellar. So, you know, there is, I think, a reckoning, a reconnection. You know, I think you know, history. Spirits are very cultural. You know?
They're very generational as well, aren't they? Sometimes it skips a generation. You don't drink what your parents drank. You drink what your
They're cultural, and culture is also generational, right? Like you know, the music and so on. I see my kids, you know, who are born in the 2000 basically, and they're listening sometimes to the Beatles, you know, and then some people used to think was
my 12-year-old son listens to the Beatles. Yeah,
you see,
yeah.
So it's these cycles, and I think you'll see it more. So to your question is, I think the French are slowly reconnecting to something that's very, and I think the world are mostly reconnecting. You know, with the frontier going back up, which is not necessarily a good thing, but also people are like, okay, wait a minute, but who am I? What's my own culture? And cognac is you know, that Frenchness is being discovered, but back.
What do you wish more people understood or knew about cognac?
Its authenticity. It's very magical to cognac. How pleasurable it is, because in the end, why do we do this? You and I. Why do we walk up in the morning? Is for people to have a better life. I always tell the team, we're trying to make this world better a barrel at a time. Because when you're around a good glass of cognac or a good glass of rum or having a great gin and tonic, these are good moments you remember all your life. It's with good friends. And so I think that pleasurable, and cognac is delicious, you know, and I think I tell people, just have a glass of cognac, either a highball, either old-fashioned, either like we do right now. I mean, look, you know, we're having fun. And so, yes, I think it's that. And I don't put a built front. That's where maybe I differ from others. I don't put a big frontier between high-quality spirits. To me, they all serve the same purpose, whether it is delicious single malts. I've got a lot of good friends. We swap barrels and we swap knowledge like kids swap Pokemon cards. You know, we're like, oh, I'm going to tell you what I do with this barrel. And the guy's like, you know what? I'm going to tell you this. You know, Alex Chatko comes to mind, you know, in Teeling, for example. And one day I'm there, and one of the bad ideas I said, you know, we make Pinot de Charente. It's the grape must. We fortify it with wine. Why don't you do this with the, you know, the wort, you know, and then you fortify it and do a Pinot de, like a whisko.
Yeah, Pinot de Uski or something.
It was a failure, apparently. He's like, Alexander, I said, you have to wait in the barrel for 2 to 3 years. And then he's sending me messages. Tastes like shit, still tastes like shit. I'm like, all right, wait a little more. I've done this with rum, actually.
Yeah.
You know, like, you know, a must from the cane.
Yeah.
And then you fortify it with rum. It's really interesting. So, you know,
interesting.
so we swap knowledge.
That sounds like it's going to be more tasty than the whiskey one, I think.
Yeah. It's still aging some, actually. So if he listens, you know, I can't wait to
watch
taste
this
it more.
space. Yeah. So I want to take you back to 1996, 30 years ago almost.
Yeah, you're right. 29.
Yeah, I did a little bit of research. I tried to work out what gins were on the market in 1996. So the list I've got, and maybe you know more than me: Gordon's, Tanqueray, Beefeater, Bombay Sapphire. Yeah, Bombay
Sapphire was just out.
Out, yeah. Plymouth, Boodles, Booths, Seagrams, and a couple of Spanish brands as well. Larios.
Larios.
Yeah. That's about it, right? The gin market was in the midst of a bit of a dip. Vodka was massive at that point.
Yeah.
And you launched Citadelle Gin, which is France's first craft gin, if you want to use that sort of umbrella sort of terminology, but also probably the first modern craft gin product.
Well, yeah, and again, you connect the. I had no clue what I was doing. I really want to be honest with
That was
you.
what I was getting at.
A lot of guys are like, "Oh man."
I was like, why did you? So what were you thinking? Why did you do this?
Very easy. You know, Cognac vineyards. That's where I live. Hilltops have this all crumbled down little juniper fields, and and they're worth. The land is worth not much because it's too stony to plant grapes, and there's one right next to Chateau Bonbonnet on the hilltop where there's a little crumbled down windmill. And I saw these juniper berries. Now, also, we're the product of how we raised and what we're drinking when we were kids. I always believe that what you drink when you're young, then you drink a more sophisticated, or you produce a more sophisticated expression of it later on in life. It's a big debate we have in Cognac, because if segmentation of price is going to, influence what you're going to be drinking later. And, I'm of that generation when we were kids where we drank a lot of shitty gins. Drinking age was 16 years old in France. You'd go out in the disco at the time, and you drank a terrible gin tonics. And you just had a party at home and you didn't spend too much at the cashier that night, but next morning when you woke up, you
paid the price.
You paid the price. And I think a lot of us have been through this. And I know, remember I'm farming and I'm like, this is made with juniper berry, and junipers are delicious. When you come to Chateau Bonbonnet now, you have all these juniper trees, 20 hectares, so 50 acres. You take these juniper berries when they're ripe, you chew on them. It's like a candy. They're sweet, a little tart. So how can you make something so terrible with something that's delicious? The problem is the gin regulation. And you know what I think about gin regulation should create a framework. After that, it's about transparency. But the framework here is not really there. It's a spirit with the dominant flavor of juniper berries. So if you use artificial flavored juniper berries, qualifies as a gin. So a lot of people went that route for profit, and for making it cheaper. So, and companies who make flavors for, hair fresheners or make flavors for that, and we drank
particularly in the midst of a downturn, right? Because
You're right.
in a downturn, it becomes a race to the bottom, right?
A race to the bottom. Exactly true. So, I was like, all right, we got this still. Think about it. You distill 5 months out of the year, you make cognac. By law, you have to stop on, March 31st. The rest of the time, I was young, a bit intense, and you see all this, and we're just sitting next to these stills, man. And there's juniper berries up that hill. So what do? I go to customs. I believe we need to talk, always. And I say, I'm going to be making gin. And I had already made a batch. And I thought they'd be, you're young, you think the world is your oyster. They're going to be, man, that's such a great idea. They look at me and says, no way, man. What are you doing? I'm like, well, we got the juniper story, same thing. I explain. And, I research a lot. So I had a lot of research. And I did find the history of the origin of certain Genièvre or Genever, which is, as you know, the father or the mother of gin. And so the guy was there, is like, we're not doing this. And I said, but there's no law that says I can't, and he says, there's no law that says he can.
And the problem here, the sticking point was the use of the cognac stills.
Yeah. But I agreed to do it off season.
Yeah.
But then I had to think.
But the idea that the law is like, you can't distill eau de vie to make cognac, and it was grey area as to whether or not the stills could be repurposed to make something else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I even had a guy, that was actually a friend of mine. He said, you're going to corrupt the copper of the stills. I'm like, I said,
or your cognac's going to taste like juniper.
You can't do that. If you clean it, this is not porous. But then, and that man, his son now is making gin and cognac, interestingly. And so, the idea was we could do this and we could make it delicious. And so we zeroed in. I still have the archives, actually. I discovered, Citadelle comes from, because cognac has all these citadels that we built in the long, hundreds of years ago to, I guess, was to keep the English at bay. By the way, we didn't do such a good job. Thank God, because the English did so much for Bordeaux and Cognac.
Yeah.
And so and this Citadelle. So there was even a newspaper in the 1800s called La Citadelle. And then I discover, maybe serendipitously, I don't know how to say it in English, that the original, the one that was the first patented Genièvre distiller was in the Citadel of Dunkirk or North, and it was called La Citadelle. I was like, oh, that's cool. So I thought it was a cool name.
So it sort of made sense.
We call it La Citadelle or Citadelle. And then, and then luckily, there's usually a great, like a French administration, if you really sit down, it takes a few years, but people listen to each other. I would have disagreed back then because I was really antsy. I'm impatient nature. So
it took a few years though, right?
5 years.
So Citadel launched in 96. Is that
So we started in 4 years. 1992, we were very serious about it.
So yeah, so when I was sort of emphasizing how, the landscape of gin in 1996, the idea actually came about in 92.
Yeah.
Bombay Sapphire would not have been around then.
No. But and I actually went to meet the man who conceptualized Bombay Sapphire, was Michel Roux.
Yeah.
Who he wouldn't meet me, but he was from Saint. He's a cognac guy, American guy, very successful. And
of course, you had Grey Goose around that time as well, also cognac.
Yeah. You're right.
Well.
You're right. Very much so. And so very well. And so yes, so that's the thing. And it was to make a product we would love. I know a lot of people say I'm wrong with this, and I respect that. They say you should have panels to taste the future of what people are going to taste or what. We make products we love, man. We just make something we're gonna be drinking a lot of it. I'm working.
What are you saying? People disagree that you haven't done your market research?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I admit.
Yeah, but that's that's like as the Henry Ford. I think it might be a misnomer that he actually said this, but Henry Ford famously, apparently said, "If I'd done my market research, people would have told me they needed a stronger horse."
Oh, faster horses! I love that quote actually because I've used it a few times, and so for us, it's just today. Remember, we're on this planet to share beautiful moments with friends. Maison Ferrand is a community on a mission. We're just there. And you've been to Bonbonnet. I mean, my kitchen is everybody's kitchen downstairs. We live together. And so, to me, we do products that we think, man, that should be delicious. And that's why we create probably 5 new products every month. And we launch once in a while. There's a lot of crazy stuff. The team calls them the 5-legged sheeps. We have a lot of 5-legged sheeps, and they're spirits. And they're in the room somewhere. And sometimes one of the sheep makes it out. And all these are 5-legged sheeps, stuff that. And so we love researching that, And look, I distilled the gin when I use French pickle, les cornichons. And I thought that little brininess would be delicious, to like in a dirty martini. And
so the cornichon is the botanical.
The cornichon. And so
you're right. There's definitely a link to a martini there.
It's very spicy, it's delicious. So when I talk to the team, we have Angelique at marketing, who's incredible. I never believed we should have anybody in marketing. And then my sales team, we work by budgets, remember, feet on the ground. And the sales team one day said, we have a budget. We are going to take in our own budget to a marketing person because we are sick of printing brochures at Kinko's, it was in the US. We need somebody who does brochure. That was the old days. And then finally, there's this young woman arrives, and she was so knowledgeable about rum. I was totally baited, because she arrives, and she's like, I can make what you do shine. I was like, what do you mean? And I said, but then I tell the team, this is going to cost us 20 barrels a year. And they're like, yeah, but we need to do this, Alexandre. And I agreed. So most companies, marketing guys are like the dreamers, and the production guys, I know them. They're like, man, we're going to have to do this. We're exactly the other way around. She's this super structured, Remember the Hogo that I showed you earlier, which is a supercharged rum.
Yeah.
I want to put on the label, and if she's listening, please don't buy it unless you know what it is. And she think I suck at marketing, and she's right.
A warning symbol.
But this, if you don't know what it is, you shouldn't buy it.
It's like when you used to buy the CDs, and it would have the warning about dangerous, like bad language.
I really
record.
I never thought of
so
that.
It's sort of like that. It needs the big syrup. Yeah.
A big syrup on it. So that's.
Well, by the way, for anyone who's not sure what we're talking about, it is a rum, a very, very, very high-ester rum, which we're going to try a little bit later. We'll get back to it. But that was.
So we created Citadelle 1996. I had 2 babies, Ariane, our daughter, and the same year we had Citadelle that were finally launched. And the French customs, thanks to them, said, okay, you can do it. And we did. And so now it's yes, it was, in retrospect, maybe the first artisanal gin, and we planted juniper berries so we could actually grow our own. And I bought fields from top of hills, that again they were not used anymore, but you have these old trees that are still there.
Can you meet all of the supply from what you're growing?
Not yet. No. I think in another 5 years, because I used to grow a sunflower, and with polyculture, same in Barbados, we grow yam and to originate the land and wheat. And so, but it was not organically grown, so we clear the land for 5 years. So it becomes back organic, and we grow the juniper berries organically. Juniper berries, very honestly, is quite easy to grow organically. It grows naturally. So why not do that? The harvesting is difficult, but the rest is not that difficult.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of juniper is just wild, right?
That's true.
Yeah.
And then in that case, for us, it just grows naturally there. So it's basically, we just planted them. We had to understand the male, the female, what type of variety, the juniper communis. So we did all that research. And then, so we're not self-sufficient yet, but we're planning more to be there. Next time you come, you'll see there's a lot in front of you.
Yeah, no, I'd look forward to that. So next year will be 30 years of Citadelle, is that?
You're right.
That is, I mean, that's
30 years of Citadelle.
Amazing.
It's funny you mentioned Plymouth, because Plymouth is a big one, because I'm not sure it was there, because probably down to nothing, because it's actually Charles Rolls, very important man.
Fever Tree.
Who Fever Tree, but before was Plymouth. He bought Plymouth. And in 1997, he's launching Plymouth, or relaunching, I should say, because Plymouth is a very historical brand.
Yeah.
Of course.
But that distillery was in bad way.
Yeah. To me, it was almost like I see cladding, like kind of closed down, what I mean?
Yeah.
And so he does that. And so you had the British guy and the French guy,
Yeah.
He called me the Renaissance man. He was
Charles. You didn't know that he was doing that at the time you were launching Citadelle. It just so happened.
When I did Citadelle and I heard what he was doing, and I called him and I said, this is the two of us, let's do it. And there was another guy that did a gin also in a year later or 2 years later, and he went bust in Netherlands. We are not doing very well financially with this, but we went on telling the world, there's a new thing, it's called gin, and it's made artisanally. And I think we're just like two guys preaching in the desert. And finally, we got lucky.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's lucky you had the cognac business, right? Probably the gin would not have survived on its own until
very much so
the late noughties kind of thing, where it really started to pick up.
Yeah, and I made all the mistakes in the box, so I overinvested. I'm a very eager man, so we just went all the way. We said we're going to do this. The equipment was there. We planted juniper berries after that, and so on. So yeah, that almost. My first break with Citadelle was an incredible chef, Ferrand from
El Bulli.
El Bulli at the time. And
that's a good ambassador.
He's on TV 1999 or something. I'd forgot the year. So 3 years or a few years after we launched, and he's on TV. Spain loves gin, and he's saying gin and tonic is a gastronomic act. Use a wine glass and not a tube, because when we were kids, it was just a tube where the ice cube were stuck at the bottom. And use a wine glass to develop the gin, and then he said use a good gin, and he whips out a bottle of Citadelle on TV.
No way.
That was TV, and at the time there was not so many channels, right? So my distributor called. I thought Barcelona had won a soccer game, because he was so excited, and that was a big break for us.
That's
because
amazing.
Then the Spanish, we started becoming really, really developing.
Yeah, so I think he kind of helped to popularize the wine glass serve.
That's his idea,
right?
I think that's his idea. And then also making better tonic. Yeah, you're right. Tonics. He made his own, because I'd said at the time I don't find what I want, and he made his own. And then when Charles sold Plymouth, he said, I did the gin, I'm gonna do the tonic, and he did Fever Tree, which is a different story. He's an incredible businessman, and another good friend. He's somebody I have a lot of respect for.
All right, let's talk about rum. So 1999. You launched Plantation, now Planteray, which began a kind of remarkable journey, I think, for you and for the rum category as well. Before we get into that business, what's your sort of earlier memories of rum growing up? Because of course, France is a rum-producing nation, albeit in the Caribbean with Martinique and Guadeloupe, Marie-Galante. So what were your earlier interactions with rum? Did you drink it as a teenager?
I can tell you exactly. I remember exactly. I grew up in, like I said, tiny little village. So every morning the bus would take us at 7 a.m, and we'd bus for 14 kilometers to Charolles, the White House, Charolais, and Charolles was a little high school. And just 15 years before me, you would have been served a glass of red wine during lunch, right? And so we stayed there all day. That was scrapped out. But we still had, very often, the dessert was baba au rhum.
Oh, yeah.
So, it's a cake infused with rum. We were, we're high school. And of course, when you're kids, you're there. So yes, you take the cake, but there's left there, and you press that sponge, and you got so much rum. You squeeze the rum out of the cake. So that's my first experience of rum.
Wow.
This very deep, like rum agricole.
It was agricole.
Oh yeah. Yeah, this is France. Yeah. Think about it. That's the 1980s, and so. That's my first experience with rum. And there's this big exotic, like right in my face, taste of it. And that's my first experience of rum. Quite often, that was a dessert, this very sponge. The cake was not that great, but we squeezed the rum out of it. And, when you're kids, you got, alcohol around your, of course, experience.
Oh, yeah.
So that was my first experience. And how I always was, I had, remember I do a lot of partnerships with different distillers around the world. We swap barrels, we do a lot of things. So I've worked with rum distillers, worked with, tequila distillers, like Carlos Camarena comes to mind, for example. And I know you're a specialist, and I have a lot of respect for Carlos, for example. And so guys who just have a vision of their spirits also. And somebody very important in my life was Thierry Gardère, the man that was the owner of Barbancourt. And this man was somebody very important about the heritage of his island, his rum. And he also loved cognac barrels. So he would buy cognac barrels for me. And then, it's about 35 years or 33 years ago. So why don't you come spend some time with me in Haiti? And I love Haiti. And now Haiti goes through a really rough time. His daughter actually and her husband were with me this weekend in Paris. We spent some time. They still live in Haiti, and Thierry passed, and they still run Barbancourt beautifully. They make a beautiful rum. And so I go there, and progressively showed more, and I saw, when you make wine, I grew up making wine, and bacteria is your enemy. You're like, you need to clean your equipment, you have the yeast, and because the bacteria can attack yeast. And you arrive in the wrong country, and Thierry, I loved the techniques, and he introduced me. He opened the Caribbeans to me, and another man called Laurie Barnard, who was very, very, very creative from St. Lucia. And Laurie, it was his first trip to France, let alone Cognac. We spent, again, swapping Pokemon cards about knowledge. They wanted to know a lot about élevage, the aging, the small pot stills, And so... Laurie researched different stills and different juice, and so we're just learn a lot from one another. And they're telling me, you're gonna go to Barbados. There's that distillery. They're growing bacteria. I'm like, no, they're growing yeast, like what you guys do, because you're super, super good at what you do. No, actually, it's bacteria in Jamaica as well, and Guyana as well. And when I saw it the first time, I didn't be, you're like, no, bacteria is the opposite of what you do. It's like, you're going to jump off the cliff and you'll be good and alive when you fall down, Yes, are you sure? Yes, go ahead. That's kind of that thing. And yes, I was baffled. And yes, this is something I was like, I want to do this. And I started saying, just if you give me barrels, pay me with barrels. And so I got a few barrels. And I worked with different people, and I would age them in our cognac barrels. And I read a lot about the fact that if you think about it, using bourbon barrel for cognac, for rum is very recent. It's since the 1940s. Before that, they were reusing a lot of different barrels. They were
Whatever
using
they could get their hands on.
a lot of vats. Matt will tell you from all the research, vatting was king or queen. So long story short, I fell in love. And then, how I love diversity of flavors, which I call terroir, but I say terroir, I'm going to stop using that term more because I think it's been raped a little bit. Now it's like, it's like craft, these words that now I'm like, all right, let's not use that anymore.
It sort of loses its meaning the more it gets used.
You know what I mean?
But then, I don't know, there's something about reclaiming it, I think, in the right context.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But to me, that sense of culture and origin that you have in the Caribbean, that at the time was there, but was not celebrated, just hit me in the face. The fact that somebody in Jamaica is saying this is the best, and the Barbadian says yes, but this is the best, and everybody's got their own culture, and they're very different. And you taste one that's here, and the other one that's there. You think the third one's going to be somewhere in the middle. Actually, it's somewhere else,
yeah.
right? And then you meet Liam Costello at Fiji, who's introducing you to Fiji rum, and you're like, what? And Fiji is like, you taste it, you just remember all your life, same thing. So yes, to me, imagine a guy like me. I was there, and my team. I mean, my team is incredible. I mean, we're a family. We're together, And so I brought back this, and I put them in the cognac barrel. I'm part of this group, Master Blenders in Cognac. We used to meet every Wednesday, and apparently they've done this for 100 years. And we always bring like this old cognac or young cognac or different grape varieties. As I told you, we plant more and more colombard. And one day I brought that glass of rum that has aged a couple of years, and as a double aging.
Yep.
And they're like, this is not cognac. And the oldest guy is 94 years old at the time. and I'm like, no. He said, this is rum. And he said, you got something there, And I'm like, all right. From that guy is an incredible taster. And that's how we did that. And but at the time it was a few barrels. And usually I'm really hands-on. And here I'd cherry pick a few barrels and then another few barrels.
And at this point, were you thinking, if I can make this work, if I can see that there's something in this rum aged in cognac casks in cognac, there may be a business opportunity here, there may be a brand opportunity, or were you still like, you know what, this would just be the retirement drink kind of thing?
I'd love to agree with this, but gin was like, this was thought out.
Yeah,
I had that stills, I could do this, I drank it younger. Rum was like, this was the heart, this is an incredible, the new world that opens to you, which I have so much respect for. And it was there really, but sometimes waning, and that's why my wife and I, we created a foundation that we're financing research. That's how we did the book for Navy rum. Really, what is Navy rum, And so Matt spent 6 months in the archives going through all contracts to try to understand. And he met a man called Mr. Fogg, and that man was about to die, and he died, and all his knowledge would have been gone forever. And I love these men or these ladies that when you meet them, like you got so much to learn from them. And if you don't, then it's gone forever.
It's like a kind of, it's like mining and finding a diamond, and it's this...
But then it's going to stop sparkling.
Yeah,
if you don't
diamonds
nurture it.
Finite. Yeah, and in fact, diamonds probably a bad analogy since they are forever. Yeah. But I think sometimes when you're doing research on these things, historical stuff especially, and suddenly you're like, wow, there's this untapped resource which no one knew was there, and then you find it, and then you can learn something incredible that's not been spoken about.
And if you don't do this, and we have to hurry. For example, there was a man, I love fruit liqueurs, and I have a little line called Mathilde. That's my grandmother made cassis and peach liqueurs. So I'm doing a small editions for fun, and we market a little bit of it. And there's this man that had a recipe. Each liqueur has a secret, the mise en valeur. For example, I can tell you, I love to share my secrets. Our pear, I use a little bit of quince. That little bit of quince make the pear pop. We call mise en valeur. It's like somebody with a nice makeup or a nice setting for a stone. The stone looks... So that's the mise en valeur. And every liqueur has some... Our cassis, I use the Bourgogne cassis, This guy had the secret about strawberry liqueur. And he promised me to tell me. And I'm sorry he died. And I'm still upset. He died in a car accident, and so he never got to tell anybody.
So went with him.
So, and he said he would before he passed. I would know, and I made one, and I was not satisfied with it, and we never launched it, And so you need to find these moments. And meeting Michael Fogg he was really, Matt likes to say, is the corner of the Rosetta Stone about Navy rum that these guys kept, and he passed as we were finishing the book. And that's why I called the rum, actually, with his family, of course, approval, Mr. Fogg. But rum was that discovery. And so there was not brand. I didn't have a brand. It's the buyer of the Nicolas wine shops, 550 shops in France. She passed now, Odile Boigneau. She's fascinated with spirits. She loved single malts. She loved, she did great with our cognac. And And she, one day she's in a restaurant that I go to, and I go to a restaurant always often in Cognac or in Paris. I bring a bottle of something we do, one of these 5-legged sheeps usually. And she tasted and she calls me. She said, "I'm gonna list the one product for the whole stores." And I said, "Which cognac you like the million? Because we already have 2." And she's like, "It's actually your rum." Like, she said, "I was at La Vieille Chaumière and I tried."
And which rum was this at the time?
So it was actually a Barbados vintage, my first Barbados vintage. And she's like, I'm like, "But I don't have a brand." And her father was a colonel in the army in Africa. She's this rough, like she's like, "You make a brand." And I'm like, "Okay." And look, there's a big buyer for us. And so I'm thinking about it. And I grew up on a farm, and in Plantation in France, where you plant things, and traveled a lot to the Caribbean. Farms are called Plantation, the highest sugar grade in Barbados called Plantation Reserve. Just made sense to me. To me, it was farm, the beauties in the land. Now, as you know, I've learned a lot since then. That's why we evolved the name. And actually, I just pay tribute to my team to our team in Barbados, who just explained a lot to me, but in a very genuine, like, okay, we're going to do this. And but that's how I was born. And so in 1999, we have a Barbados vintage, one from Jamaica, and Trinidad. And as you know, I feel so honored to be fully involved in Barbados and Jamaica now.
Yeah.
Trinidad, I love the guys at TDL, Trinidad Distillers. Still, when we bought West Indies Rum Distillery, and I look at this more as a wedding, as a marriage than a purchase. My grandfather always says, "You don't own the land, nobody will." It's not the man who owns land, it's land who owns man. And I agree. So you don't own a farm, you tend a farm. That humility about the land.
Yes.
I think is very important.
Yes.
Because, we're a bit delusional.
The land will be here when you're gone.
You will be in the land. They will own you for a long time.
Yeah. It will literally own you.
It's true.
Yeah.
And so, it's true with the distillery. I feel very humble. I'm there. I'm tending the distillery right now with the team, and tribute to, Don Ben and Dario, and of course, Andrew Hassel, who's, the general manager. And
this is a West
Indies. And Digger, there's a man who's been walking to distillery, still in great shape for 45 years. He's distilled for 45 years.
Wow.
And then before, his father came to distillery and distilled for 47 years. And they overlapped for a while. So that's why I brought you this rum was distilled in the Rockley. It's a still that was built in 1780 that was retired. We fixed it. Digger never remembered using it, but he remembered his father telling him about how special was that still. And we fixed it, and I brought a bottle for you.
Well, thank you. Let's taste that in a minute. Shall we try one of the Plantation bottles first?
So we have different expressions. We can do here. We can start with something you might find when there's a black label. It's a single cask. So we brought a few single casks. So we have one that's kind of fun. It's actually we have our friends.
Yeah.
It's an amaretto, a barrel. So what we're doing with the single casks, they are barrels where we're paying tribute to the time where people were not just using, bourbon barrels, right? And so remember our idea with the Plantation or Planteray was to say, look, yes, bourbon barrels great, but we're cognac makers. We got all these barrels. Why not do a double aging? And what I discovered is rum had that historical heritage of actually, double aging and dynamic aging, like shipping in barrels and then double aging either in Liverpool, London, Bordeaux, and Cognac also. And I thought it'd be cool to walk back in the footsteps of these makers.
Yeah, so tell me about that history, because I think, as you've alluded to already, there's some politics in certain sections of the rum world. Some people are critical of other people and their practices. Most of this goes on very much behind the scenes and a very small number of people. But one of the things that you're sometimes challenged on is this double maturation, and the difference that you manifests itself from maturing something in the tropics to maturing something in Europe. You lose less on the angel share. Just the general temperature and the environment is going to affect the product in a different way. So I think probably it's important to as you say, there's this historical justification for this. So unpack that for me a little bit. Tell me about how this used to happen.
So, and it's interesting, by the way, this book we wrote about Navy rum, because I do believe Navy rum is the father or the mother of rum. As we know
you do get the amaretto.
You do it a little bit in there. And so, it's true that rum has its own identity. That rest, we talked about it, which is fermented, distilled with all these ways of fermenting. But also remember, the aging, there's no forest of oak in the Caribbean and so on. So those imported barrels are usually vats made of local wood. That's the historical. But also rum was double aged since inception. And that's one of the characteristics of rums. This is not arguable. It's historical. We know for sure. And
when you say double aged, you mean it's aged initially in the tropics in barrels, then it's transferred to presumably North America or Europe, and then put in new casks and then matured there further.
Yeah. And that's the double aging. Very often at the country of origin, sometimes even vatted, and so on. Navy rum is a good example for over 300 years of that. And the distillery, Stays West Indies Rum Distillery, used to have its warehouse in Liverpool and so on. And you see in the archives, they say, this one needs a soft landing, and we need the differences of temperature to integrate the tannins. We're going to ship it to Liverpool. That was part of the process, and so I thought, with Planteray, because we were in Cognac, we had these Cognac barrels available. I thought that would be paying tribute to that side of rum. Now, what I love about rum is the richness of history and diversity, and I think the debate should be transparency. We do double aging. We explain that. There's beautiful rums that are tropical aged. There's the historical brand of the distilleries called States. States couldn't use his own name until recently because this was this genius distiller that built that distillery. But the local, at the time, some of the local traders, local bottlers, made sure that he couldn't use his own name and that they would sell through him, the local traders. So when we purchased the distillery, we asked if we could get the name out. So now it's States. So you'd had States before underneath every label. Now it's States by States. And then it's tropical aged. So I'm not pegging one against the other. Sure. I'm saying that heritage of the double aging is beautiful. I'll give you an example. A friend of mine is a winemaker in Pauillac in Château Latour. Good wine. Delicious wine. And every year I get a few hundred barrels. They get filled with rum that same day. No oxidation, no need to acidify or to put sulfur in the barrel. With the double aging, I can do a single cask. I almost brought you a bottle. And
don't tell me about what you didn't bring.
There's a lot on my desk at the distillery that you almost got that I thought I'm going to go to jail if I get so much rum and cognacs and so on. So we did that. And, and that was a way to be able to do this, right? Because if you ship an empty barrel to Barbados, first of all, for the environment, it's not wonderful. But also by the time it arrives there, you have to put sulfur in it and stuff. And I don't want to do this. I want to do this the traditional way where it's the rum that's going to preserve all these flavors. So now, tropical aging is wonderful as well. We do Stays, which is 100% tropical age. In fact, in a warehouse right by the sea, just 10 yards literally from the beach. And so that's the beauty of rum. It's like somebody saying wine, we should do it that way and that way. There's many types of wines or many types of cheeses. And there's many types of rums and many types of historical approach to rum. And why would you obliterate? There's a big debate right now in Jamaica. I'm very transparent with you. Where the team at the distillery, and who am I? It's not me. It's really the team at the distillery. As you know, with Clarendon and Long Pond, we've been double aging or aging at the point of destination for over 100 years. And suddenly we have opponents to these distilleries who are saying, you should stop doing this. Talk to the team at the distillery who've done this for generations. Suddenly you tell them you can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
Of course they disagree.
So just to keep everyone up to speed, this is to do with the geographical indication of rum in Jamaica, which I think was originally granted in 2016. And then in October last year, the Intellectual Property Office amended the GI for Jamaican rum to ban aging overseas. So this was pushed by the Spirits Pool of Association, which represents all 6 distilleries in Jamaica. And the aim ostensibly was to strengthen the GI, but obviously the change has sparked controversy because National Rums of Jamaica, which you are 1/3 of, along with Demerara and the government of Jamaica, you mature some of your rum in France. You mature all of your plantations.
Or in the US,
Or in
where,
the
you
US.
know, for example, for Myers, which is a very historical,
Yep.
delicious rum brand, it's matured double age or aged in America, like it's been for decades and decades and so on. So,
And then is Captain Morgan a supplier as
alors there is Captain
customer,
Morgan.
sorry?
There's a spiced rum that's made in St. Croix. It's not made by us, but remember, Captain Morgan used to be the governor of Jamaica a long time ago. He was a pirate that became a governor. And so the original Captain Morgan is a Jamaican rum. It's called Jamaican Black, and that one is also made by us and is also double age or age at the destination.
Yeah.
So, and it's been like this for decades and decades and decades. So for us, a strong GI is a GI that respects heritage and that promotes transparency. That's a strong GI. And there's debates about size of barrels and stuff, but that's the crux of the issue is the one you just underlined.
How bad would this be? Because I mean, what the GI really comes down to is what you can label a product as, right? And you could still say, I don't know, there'd be workarounds. So instead of saying Jamaican rum, you could say Jamaican style rum, right? Or something similar to that. Is that how devastating is that?
Well, of course, imagine, I mean, this is not about me. It really is not me. Remember, grandfather, one day you attend a distillery. I'm there. The team, imagine, families, communities who've been making rum this way, who contributed to make the reputation of Jamaican rum as it is. Lompon, Clarendon, Myers, original Captain Morgan before the spice expressions. That's the big history of rum. I mean, Lompon, 1753. So suddenly you tell these people, and they should have a voice. It's not about Planteray. Yes, of course, we're part of it, you know. We are, through Stays West Indies, a third owner. The other owner is Demerara Distillers. This is as Caribbean as it is. Actually, they have a wonderful GI where they label differently by saying, okay, we have the special reserve when it's aged there. And it's a great GI, by the way. Very smart, very strong GI because it respects the heritage. And we are respecting the other players. I think they're great distilleries. The issue is that, respect these distilleries as well. And so for us, the team, imagine if you live in Clarendon Valley and your family's been doing this, working to that distillery. And then suddenly you're being told, wait a minute, not anymore. Of course they're fighting. And we are supporting that fight. And we hope that at one point we'll be able to come around a table and say, it happens in a lot of GI, by the way.
I mean, I guess what they're possibly following the suit of cognac, of single malt Scotch whiskey. Cognac has to be matured within the cognac region of cognac, right? No?
No. Cognac, once it's 2 years old, can be aged anywhere around the world as long as it's registered by the government of France and the cognac and so on.
So single malt Scotch, then, as an example, that has to be aged in Scotland.
To me, you know, rum shouldn't follow the suit of any other spirit. It should be itself. You know, that's where I have a problem. Is that I got guys say, look at whiskey. We should be just like whiskey. Rum's got so much going for it. We thought at first was just yeast would be just Saccharomyces cerevisiae yeast. We're saying, no, but we use Schizosaccharomyces yeast and, that we grow, and that we use. So we need to protect this. Now, that's why I'm hopeful, because that aspect, which was a position of National Rum of Jamaica, was heard. To say, wait a minute, if we do this, then this part of Jamaica that goes. You know, you won't be able to do the super estery rum if you're only using Saccharomyces cerevisiae yeast, which is baker's yeast or distiller's yeast, because the Caribbean's magic is the yeast. So we have agreed on this. That's why I'm staying very hopeful, very respectful to the other distilleries. I understand that everybody's trying to protect like their own agenda.
What do you think their agenda is? Do you think their agenda is that to be Jamaican rum, it has to be matured in a tropical environment? Do you think that's the fullness of their agenda, or do you think there's something else?
Maybe because, you know, there's people who say, you know, because let's say if you follow the suit of cognac, the raw material should be from the country of origins. And as you know, rum, much like whiskey, buys in. So what is a strong GI? Strong doesn't mean anything unless you say a strong GI is a GI that respects the heritage of the people who've helped build it. It's not about me. It was way before. And for us is to make sure that is preserved, So for us, double aging. Also another thing, the fact that so that double aging is part of it for sure. So that's what it is. But very often it's the marketing teams that are fighting because everybody wants the GI to be what they are.
Yeah.
So
this represents their brand.
So I'm the one, and that way I can win. And I think it's bigger than all of us. And again, due respect to other distilleries, I hope we can sit down and say, hey man, this is what we do for hundreds of years. We are absolutely willing to write, you see, it's all on the labels to say double age or age that much here and here, and let the consumer decide which tradition they like best, or actually buy one of each. And that's the beauty. And, so for us, yes, I am hopeful that in the end, we'll be able to sit down. We sure are extending our arms,
Is there, what is the latest on this? Like, is there...
It's hard to say,
Is there any movement?
Well, the movement right now is the team it's not me, it's the team in Jamaica led by, Martha Miller, who's the president and, the CEO of National Rum of Jamaica. And her team, the distillers, the people who take care of this, are fighting this GI that makes the practices, the 100-years-old practices of Lampon and Clarendon obsolete. Of course, when did you fight it? And yes, Kamal Samaro, from DDL, us, and the government of Jamaica, we are here, the three shareholders, and we're thinking, wow. We don't want to be remembered as the guys who let down the team. That puts a lot of pressure, man, because it's history looking up on you, down on you.
Look back
It's looking
at this moment, whatever happens.
Yeah.
And look at who was involved at the time.
Yeah.
Whichever way it goes.
Yeah. Oh, I hope. Honestly, it's about being inclusive, about these heritages that are very special and very wonderful.
What can you say about Clarendon and Long Pond distilleries? We'll get to Barbados in a second, but since we found ourselves in Jamaica, what can you say?
Since we talk about Jamaica, I have a beautiful Long Pond, actually, from Long Pond used to have, and still has it. It's a little Blair column that is a tiny little copper column that imploded actually in 2010, and this is a 1998 CRV, the little column from Long Pond is delicious. I thought you would really enjoy this.
Thank you.
And that's, I have a few barrels left of this. And so it's a single cask, as you can see here, as you can see, there's a further aging. So in that case, I use a Boston barrel. Boston is a distillery in, and I use some of the fresher barrels, in Kentucky. And so this one is aged in bourbon barrel first in Jamaica. And if you look on the back, you have the full transparency, how many years where, and then it's used in a cognac barrel and then in a Boston barrel. And the idea is to make it shine. So that's this beautiful Long Pond expression. And when you taste it, you tell me if we should kill that tradition or not. Cheers again.
Oh, wow. That's delicious.
So
really good.
Incredible, right? And so...
the weight, the depth of it, yeah.
And it's extremely, extremely sophisticated. You feel the layering. So, yeah, no, I think it's wonderful. So, that's the heritage of Long Pond right here in your glass.
It's lovely. So yeah, Clarendon and Long Pond, what can you say about the two distilleries to sort of split them apart in terms of the types of rum they produce? And
it's a great question.
In history, but
in Jamaica, you have a northern style and southern style. We don't have time to go over everything. The southern styles are the bigger distilleries. So and the northern styles are smaller distilleries. They used to be quite a bit, and there was a shift at the end of the 1800s. We know for sure at that time. Probably due to the the evolution in Europe of actually tax structures, where the different merchants couldn't import rum except they'd use a huge tax levy. So they tried to find distillers in the Caribbean that could make this supercharged rum, very, very high ester, to actually blend with local spirit. It's called Rum Verschnitz now. It's not a rum. and they would actually blend a neutral spirit. It's like it is to rum what powder milk is to milk. You know what I
this
mean?
was like very common in Germany, right? Germany were
Very
a massive importer of Jamaican rum because they were using it in confectionery.
You're right.
And that sort of thing. And so, yes, the workaround, as you say, was to make, so you avoid paying taxes, just make a more and more like an espresso of rum.
Exactly.
And then when it gets over to Europe, you can then dilute it back with a more neutral spirit.
And you know, that actually, when they went to the distilleries in the South that were more successful, bigger, they're like, man, you want to do this super concentrated stuff? I don't think so. And in the North, you know, in Trelawney, so Hamden, Lompon, Vale Royal, these distilleries listened and they said they had the know-how. Barbados the same way. We're going to make these supercharged rums. And I brought you a little sample of that. You know, this is a Hogo Monster, so it's actually past 1600s. And, you know, and so...
That's 1600 parts
esters.
per million
esters.
esters.
Esters, yes.
Which is where you get the rum funk.
Yeah. Although you start having it really at like 300, 400 and so on. But at that level, because here you have rum funk and you're like 200, 150 of esters.
Yeah.
So yes, that's why. And then, so the Northern Distillery says, sure, we'll make it for you. So that's why you have Hamden, Lompon. And so it's a chicken and egg. The people from South Jamaica like a lighter style rum. And people from the North, they like this super, super intense rum. And some people think it's because they did that, it was made that way, or it was because the distillery is starting more and more of the, what we call heavy rums. I'd like the listeners to understand that their rum or a spirit has a weight. It has water, alcohol, and the other stuff, that's the flavors. And we call that, some people call that congeners. Some people call that the love handles.
I've never heard anyone call it that, but I'm going to use that again. That's great.
And you know, when you go...
the bit that you grip onto, right?
Our distillery in Barbados, you know, especially the old guys, but the old everybody, when they love a rum, they look at you and they say, Alexander, this is rumming. That's when you have the flavors. That's the weight. The less weight, the lighter. It's called light rum. It's not rumming. And to them, no, rumming is not. And you know what I'm talking about. This is rumming all the way, right? And so these are the styles. So Lompon is this iconic distillery of making this supercharged, very intense rum. You know, not starting at, you know, at 1600s. You have 200s that are delicious. They call the common pots and so on that are, you know, pot still rums. And then Clarendon is a classic Southern style with beautiful rum, very, very textured as well. The MMW is really nice, but they don't do what is called mucking. When you do mucking, without mucking, you can go to 600 grams of esters. And then if you're going to go higher, you have to start using these very secretive techniques that Barbados, Guyana, and Jamaica have the know-how about. And that's the Northern Jamaicans when you pass the 600 marks, which is kind of the glass ceiling.
Yeah, and this is when we start getting into sort of bacterial fermentation,
You're right.
as well as yeast and long
acidification.
Fermentation.
Yeah.
High acid environments. So acidified cane juice, muck, dunder, all of these kind of different terms. So can you sort of break that apart briefly as to what it is you're trying to achieve in these? You're trying to achieve a high ester. Why acidity? What is dunder? What is muck?
So people get confused between dunder and muck, right? But that's
both of them sound pretty dirty.
Yeah, it's you know, this is the first time I saw it. I was like, oh, you know, if I fall in this, I die right away. And they look at me and it's absolutely And then it's because it's a culture. It's so sophisticated. I mean, technically, it's extremely sophisticated, and so in this culture of specific yeast and bacteria in Jamaica is called a muck pit. So people call it sometimes a dunder pit. It's a mistake. The dunder is the vinasse. When you distill what is left, everybody calls them vinasse. In Jamaica, they're called dunder.
Yeah, it's like the sour mash in.
It's like a sour mash. Yeah. So the dunder happens to be quite acidic. So if you want to acidify your wash, your wine, you can actually reintroduce dunder. Some people use that. Some people use cane vinegar. So that's why do you acidify? Because specific bacteria feeds off acidity. I make it very broad, and alcohol to create more esters, more of these incredible flavors. Now, it's not as easy as it sounds, but that's what's happening. So people have different. So people get confused. They call a Dunder pit. No, the Dunder is really not kept. It's just when it's out, you can introduce it in your wine. Sometimes a little bit in your muck pit. The muck pit is really where the reactor, all of this. It's called
Nuclear reactor for bacteria.
It's a nuclear reactor, and it's really the reactor. And in Barbados, it's called the nursery. Now, to my knowledge, where Stays is the only one who has one, but I don't know the others. But this is a nursery where you nurture, the different, elements that are going to be specific bacteria and specific bacteria to be able to create these incredible flavors. So, and you can taste it here, like this, you go and fetch beautiful flavors.
I drank it all.
This this one I'll have you later taste. This is the Barbadian expression of it, which is very different than the Jamaican flavors because everybody's doing it a different way. Everybody's got the different heritage. And then you have a distillery in Ireland, Savannah, who 15 years ago say, wait a minute, we're going to be doing this. And I think they did a great job from scratch to re-engineer their own way of doing that. And also tip of the hat to them, that's part of the heritage of rum. And remember, innovations of today are the traditions of tomorrow if they are well done, done very well.
Well, let's jump to Barbados. We've already visited Jamaica now. So in 2017, you acquired West Indies Rum Distillery in Barbados. There's only 4 distilleries in Barbados, is it still?
Oh, now you're 6, but
there's 6, is there?
Yeah.
Oh. How did this come about?
Well, they were a supplier to us. And, I always told my wife and the team, at Maison Ferrand, yes, we're doing this négociant activity by doing élevage on special rum. We are distillers, we make the stuff. It's just my dream one day, maybe. It's like, I'll be a fireman when I grow up kind of dream, And then, going to the Caribbean, I know the Caribbean extremely well, and the islands where there is a distillery, like I don't know Saint Bart, because people say, oh, you must know Saint Bart very well, but the ones like
unless there's rum being made there, I'm not going.
Saint Vincent, every distillery they do beautiful rum in Saint Vincent, for example, Saint Lucia, and Dominica has a nice distillery. So, I said one day, and then, so we started, remember we're farmers, and so we spend the money we make. It's like, you've seen Bonbonnet, I want you to come back. You'll see we invested a lot. But when we have money, we invest it. When we have no more, we stop. And then we make a little more. And then I've never took dividends in all these years because to me, my wife and I, Debbie and so on, this is a mission. This is a life mission. And we have a 27-year-old kid who's been, cheap labor when he was 14 years old on tractors cutting the grass because we don't use chemicals.
Should have had more children. And you got lots of cheap labor.
Wonderful. And then he's learned to distill at a young age. He was like the equivalent of a back bar, at Teeling, distillery. So he's been around.
He works for the business?
Not yet. He wants to learn business because he's like, look, I know techniques, but I don't want to be the hairhead son of the boss, that arrives. So he's going. He's starting an MBA in Washington D.C. Now as we speak, and he's like, I'm doing this for 2 years. I hope I can, do it. And then he's learned also basic sales with a handbag. Went to work for a competitor, for 3 years in Chicago, and then wants to join us because he was born on the barrels and on the pot stills, but he wants to learn the rest of the world. His decision. And so for us, that's that life mission about what we're doing. And so we wanted to be involved in production, with the whole team, we are makers, we're researchers and it was like, I really want to get married, and then finding the perfect match. It was exactly that because it's a marriage. It's not a purchase. It's a marriage of 2 teams, 2 missions. Do we agree? What is the next level that we can achieve together? So I looked at many possibilities with wonderful people. I mean, I know them very well. And if they're here, I'm sure they'll know. And even, we looked at Man Point St. Lucia Distillers. I think it's a great distillery. And Laurie taught me so much. And he passed in 2012. And I was like, wow, and his wife, Pauline Barnard is wonderful. We speak regularly. And we looked at that. And then, our friends, invested quite a lot there, from Spiribam, and we're like, okay, you know, and then to me that was like the star in the sky was Stays West Indies Rum Distillery, but it felt like, wow, do I dare propose kind of thing, you know, because this is distillery the most documented heritage, you know, like people say that's our tradition. We got cubic meters of documents and a team, you know. I believe a distillery has a soul, and if you betray that soul, it's not healthy. The soul of that, so distillery was sometimes started by a genius marketer, by a financier, by, I could name a lot. This one was started with a super geek distiller that had 41 patents about distilling equipment. And so States, which is one of the figure of rum of late 1800s. And his knowledge was excellency to him. And if you're very good in school with science and so on in Barbados, chances are you want to work for Stays West Indies Rum Distillery. Our master distiller, and tip of the hat to Dunder, was best kid at school, you know, in science and so on, government finances, studies in London, and his dream is to be at the distillery. Now it's 26-year distiller, master distiller now at, you know, was voted twice best rum master distiller. And he said there's this tradition, you arrive with a tire, they take off or they cut your tie, never wear a tie, you'll be distilling there, and you make rums that are rummin'. And that distillery was not really well known. Well, it's quite an important distillery because it was making rum for everybody, specific rum, very specifics, including us at Plantation and now Planteray. And it used to be owned by a family, Gaudard family, and it was publicly traded actually with a little bit. And one day the family, you know, I heard about the work I was doing with my team, and they became a big customer with all their pot still rum from a still built in 1850. I was buying this rum from that still that was making rum in 1850, and I used in all the Planteray expressions. And they're like, we want to sell the distillery because, you know, that they grew up into Gaudard Group now is a big company into food and trading. And they said, one of the owners says, I haven't been to the distillery for 10 years and I live 5 miles from it. It's a sign. We need a new mother and a new father of the mission. And I'm like, well, you got an incredible team that can do this. He said, yes, but then this distillery needs investment, needs commitment for a long, long term. And I said, it's not so much as the price, it's the vision. So they did negotiate the price, by the way. But they wanted, they
Whenever someone said it's not so much the price, it was about.
You know, they did, but in a very fair way. We stayed very good friends. They were incredible, extremely respectful, because when you invest in a country, you're very vulnerable, you know. And you know, there's always something goes wrong into the price. And once they were proven, they shook my hand and said, "You're right." And I thought, you know, you go to court there, you're just. You know, no, and honestly, very, very respectful, wonderful people. But they said, we want to meet you and we want to meet your family. So for 1 year, my kids went, they met everybody. And they said, because the distillery is right on the beach. And we had somebody and some people who didn't wish us good. And they wanted to just destroy the distillery and build a huge hotel. It's one of the most beautiful, you know, beach on the island, and the island is beautiful. I mean, Barbados is a country invented rum. It's a beautiful island, but they say this distillery is going to be there forever, and we cannot let it go unless it's the right people. And they really meant it. And so last negotiation was 10 hours in a room with a team. Yes, and
it's like this interview.
And the team of the distillery was there. My son Charles was like 16 years old, and he's reading that contract. And you know, the last negotiation, there was a glass signed by Rihanna, and one of the owners says, "But I'm keeping that glass." And I said, "Okay, we're gonna go and get it."
That's the final bit.
And we had a glass of rum, and we finally signed the agreement. So yeah, it's a dream come true, man. Because also remember,
and obviously, as we meant, I think I'm sure we totally covered this, but of course, it included this seat in National Rums of Jamaica as well. So you're not just buying a Barbados distillery; you're buying a third of 2 Jamaican distilleries as well.
Yeah, which was just so humbling because you know, and that's the fruit of history. You know, Jamaican government was genius because remember in the 20th century, people drinking like more and more lighter spirits. So all these very authentic spirits were in trouble. mid 1900s Scotch single malts. Campbellton used to have a lot of distilleries.
Yeah.
Everything shut down.
Yeah.
Jamaica used to have 600 distilleries down to six. And Jamaican government didn't want to accept this, so there were two mystical distilleries, Lone Pond and Clarendon. Think about decades ago, and they said we're going to save them. So they invested them, and then they realized we're government, we're not distillers. How we're running this?
They brought in partners.
So they call in what they thought was the most iconic distilleries technically, which was Terroir distillers. They make a mistake, and stays West Indies Rum Distillery, and they say come in, and that was way before my time. So and they got together, they reinvested. Europe actually invested with them to say we're going to save that heritage. That's why the discussion about GI, we have to do it again.
You say Europe invested?
Yes. The EU was at the time where EU was saying we're going to divest into the sugar premium that we're paying from smaller islands.
Okay.
And that was devastating because they were, how could they fight with huge Brazil and so on, sugar, Pakistan producers. And so, but they say we want to, like the relevant business that can be there tomorrow, and rum is one of them. If you show us an incredible, vision, we're going to be doing this. So the government...
So what year was that National Rums of Jamaica?
It was called National Rum Jamaica when the government of Jamaica saved this distillery.
Names remained the same when
They're the same. So it's decades ago. And there's a guy called Evan Brown that was very instrumental in this to say, he's a very old man now, and hello, Evan. And he said, no, we're going to save the day. And the government of Jamaica was genius in that, they're doing this, but they're recognizing, look, we're the government, so we're going to bring extreme know-how. What are the distilleries that are the most knowledgeable? And they brought Terroir distillers in states West Indies. So yes, being part of this is, it's humbling, it's wonderful, and it's a lot of work.
So we've mentioned the name a number of times, States. Is it time to try this?
Yeah, of course. So this is something that's very unique. I brought it just for you.
Oh,
and as the along
very
the
excited
whole
about this.
So the Barbadian and people in Caribbean is much like the British and the French. We don't throw anything away, right? And look, you got all these old buildings. We keep it. So there was that still that was decommissioned. We think about 50 years ago. It's called the Rockley. Nobody knows why. Probably there's a Rockley. Plantation was on the south, maybe from there. It's called the Rockley. It was almost like used as a roundabout in a parking lot. Was on the corner, and there's next to another one called Batson, who's still not on its own, waiting to be saved. And but it looked so old, and I know stills quite well. I collect them, and that's part of me, like being part of the history. You gotta stays West Indies is still from 1850. That still distills. You got one that's in the yard that's probably older, and another one that looks also from 1850. And then you got 9 different stills at Stays West Indies Rum Distillery altogether. And I invited a man called David Pym, the man that worked at, Dunder, at Distilling Equipment. And now he's retired, but we speak every week still. And he came and I said, David, how old is that still? Like he looks at it, inspects it, looks at it. You see the dome is all rough. It was molded in sand, probably locally. It's like a guy with a very, very bad shave. It's like this.
Molded in sand.
Molded in sand at top. And he says, what's going to save you? Because when you mold, you have to make it very thick, and that's why it's still there. And the body was plates that were hand riveted, probably locally too. So, okay, David, how old is this? And there's a shears door. So the door was added probably in the 1800s. And Dave Wondrich showed me that shears was selling doors to old still. To say, okay, you don't need to use the trunk to go inside your car. You can actually use the door. So they created a door to be able to.
Shears. Where are they? Where are they based?
They were based in Scotland, and they were a coppersmith. And they say, buy a door for your still.
Got you.
In Cognac, we still don't have doors in our stills. So if you want to clean it, you have to take all the top off.
Yeah.
And so, and so the doors from the 18. So it's, long story short, he said that still was making rum when Mozart was playing his own music. So I know music a little bit. I'm like, so late 17. He said 1780.
Wow.
This is the oldest rum still in the world. And I said, David, do you think this is a very famous engineer? He built a lot of stills in rum. I could give you the list. He said, do you think it can work again? He said, Alexander, you got the 2 guys who can fix it. They're going to spend a lot of time. Hammer, anvil. That's your tools. So we ship it back to Barbados. Government says to France to fix it. We ship it to France.
Right.
The government says no. It stays here. It's part of their. I didn't know they had a sense of their like what they had. And let me tell you, it was just in the parking lot. So I felt very special because I'm like, wow, this is a wonderful country. They're preserving the heritage. So I said, no. It's going there to fix. And if we can't fix it, it's coming back anyway. So we signed documents. Goes there. Gaylord spent 3,000 hours with a hammer and an anvil.
That sounds like a lot of hours. That sounds like a year.
3,000 hours. I know because it's down the stairs where I am. I live at the.
Because you got the invoice.
Yeah, and he's one of our guys. So I'm on.
Oh, it's one of your guys, right?
And it's on. I live on the attic, of the main house, and then on the right there's a little coppersmith shop, and on the left is the distillery. And so he fixed it. I helped him. Not for 3,000 hours, but there was some heavy.
Was it just a banging noise of copper?
Yeah,
on
of course.
3,000 hours. Yeah.
And then reshaping the neck, it was called elephant truck. And it's back to Barbados. Imagine it arrives there. That moment when you commission a still is who's going to taste that first drop is always a big honor. And, when you're like us, just a bunch of very, very passionate geeks, you're like, I want to try that first drop, and everybody's there. So it's never me because I think it should be the team. So either it's a draw or it's somebody who's very relevant. So here, Digger, he heard about that still. His father said, you should know that still. When you're here and he was there and he never tasted it before. So it should be Digger, he's been at distillery. So that first drop, he tasted, and the Prime Minister of Barbados insisted to be there. So she's there. She put her on like a big, a wax stamp. And so
she got a sniff of some new rum.
Oh, for
She's like,
sure.
Oh, come in.
A new make that the first time was made was 1780. And I brought it for you. So this one, just 7 months in the barrels, because remember, the recommissioning was recent.
Yeah.
And actually reopened the distillery to the public so people can come and actually look at the still making rum. It's like driving an old car. It's always leaking somewhere. You have to fix it back. So
I remember when I was doing my rum book, I wrote about it, and there was still a lot of unanswered questions. It sounds like many of them have been answered, or either I just didn't know the answer or couldn't find the answer, but it was known to other people at the time. But I remember even, then this is 10 years ago before you'd acquired the distillery, that this still had a sort of legendary status to it. It was something of an enigma. No one knew exactly how old it was or where it came from or anything. So it's remarkable that not only has much of this information been uncovered and exposed to the world, but not only that, I can't believe we're actually tasting rum from that still.
it's this huge rum.
Ooh.
So this is going to take your taste buds some different place.
Oh, wow. It's big. At 7 months as well, it's just delicious.
7 months.
Really, really
It's
good.
incredible, right? You got
Yeah.
the fruits, you got
Yeah.
everything. It's just, and it's huge.
And this is this cane juice?
No, this one is actually molasses.
It's molasses.
But we do also cane juice, expression. But
It tastes quite agricole to me.
yeah, but yeah, you're right because it's huge. Remember, most stills now you have swan necks. But the 18th century, 1700s, they were called elephant trunks. So they were gathering as much flavors as they could. So it's these huge, huge flavors.
That is quite
Very rustic.
and not what you would normally think of as a Barbados rum, I don't think.
Well,
in the modern era.
What you think Barbados rum? It's a great question. When people say, okay, what is Barbados rum? And we sat down with the team. It's like kind of a who am I kind of thing moment. Barbados rum to me is about intensity, layering, and elegance. So it's not by chance that Barbados, arguably because I know Kamal will argue with me in Demerara, is the country with the most diversity of stills. So we have a chamber still that was built, in America, East Coast. We have this 1700 still. We have the Greg has a double skin in the neck, so you can run water in the double skin to create more or less reflux.
Yeah.
So we have, 3 type of columns. We have a very modern one. We have etc. So I think it's like if it were painting, it would be impressionism. You create shapes by these dots of colors. So that's one of the dots of colors.
Yeah, sure. I mean, of course, I guess the diversity of stills in Barbados now allows lots of options for blending, which is to some extent the island style, that sort of blend of lighter and heavier rums. But of course, when this still was built. There were no
yes.
stills.
According to Andrew, who's in a I'm pushing Andrew. Andrew runs the distillery, has two passions in life beside his family. He's a very family man, wonderful man. He's surfing and researching rum. So I pushed him because
Both noble passions, I'd say, and Barbados is the right place for it.
He's doing PhD on the historical, the history of making rum, like the equipment and the story. And he found that the early 1800s, like Barbados had one of the heaviest rum, for example, from equipment and recipes. And so, because Barbados has the oldest documentation about rum making, as 1650, every island, of course, has so much heritage. Barbados has actually documents, that it is that's why Mia Mottley, the prime minister, who's an incredible woman, says rum is Barbados and Barbados is rum. And, inspired my daughter, and somebody is writing a book about that, just to show that you have rum shops, 1,500 rum shops in Barbados. It's part of the culture.
And that's another, again, sort of if you're putting points in this history timeline, only 130 years after the first documented evidence of rum production in the Caribbean, this still was making spirits on that.
Absolutely so. And probably in a very... See, I got the American Distilling Institute gave me this little award, as a... whatever. And it's just a man of the year or something. And that's the George Washington still.
Yes.
From
Vernon, yeah.
And they are very similar.
Yeah.
They're very similar.
Which would have been the same time as well, 17.
Think about it,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And that's why I wear it for double reason.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking that's a little nod to the Rockley.
Yeah.
And so the Rockley is there it's waiting for you to come and check it out.
I look forward to it.
So we make two styles, the heavy, and then we make a classic. There's a recipe also, we use seawater. I think what people call the Rockley style was probably... because there's some more recent rum from, I want to clarify this, from Barbados called Rockley style.
Yeah.
And, Bristol Spirits does a great, beautiful one from in 1986. But at the time, the Rockley was decommissioned, and they rightly so called it like this. But I do believe we're 80% sure, 90% sure, that's a recipe that used a little seawater in it. That's this little briny, it's very different. And so... we're doing that as well. So we're going back to the Rockley style in the Rockley.
I think that's like as a yeast nutrient.
Yeah. It's a yeast stress. It's like when you have a pressure, if you do the fermentation at, low ground, you have a high pressure.
Yeah.
Or if you do fermentation.
Oh, so the salt lowers the boiling point or increases the boiling point?
Well, yeah, but it's not even about the distilling. In that case, it's mostly about the fact that yeast is going to behave differently. It's going to stress the yeast. The sodium.
Yeah.
It's like if you and I...
Yeast doesn't tend to like salt that much.
Not so much.
No.
So, but a little bit is going to create a little stress. If you put stress on me or we're going to behave differently, And so the yeast is going to develop different flavors.
Yeah.
But you need to do it just a pinch.
Yeah, you're not trying to make the rum taste like seawater.
No, because when you distill, sodium cannot distill through. So it's just creating a different environment for fermentation.
Okay, so to finish up, you mentioned heavy rums.
Well, I brought you a little monster here.
Heavier than this, probably.
No, not outside of a distillery. So I brought you this. I thought you'd appreciate because I know you're very, you know so much about spirits. So remember, you perceive Marc as a taster. So I encourage you to dilute it, in the second tasting. But that's, anything that's higher than 600, we call them the Hogo. Hogo comes, as you know, from Ogu, a high taste. And everything past 1600 we call monsters. So this is a Hogo monster.
This Virgo monster is practically crawling out of the glass on me.
It is going to also, what's going to be...
So how to describe this? It's the weight and the sort of heavy dankness of the aroma on this is just unbelievable. It is almost like the steam coming off it as you smell it.
It's incredible. And so remember, it was, and you'll see it tastes sweet on the palate.
It's like roasted, intensely roasted pineapple-y.
You're right. You got, but there's also a little, it acetates. It's almost like
the gluiness.
The gluiness.
Yeah.
But if you dilute it down, then that will disappear, and you'll get to the exotic fruits.
So it's 56.6%.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, I told you the esters is past 2,000, and you see on the palate it's actually a little bit sweet. I mean, sweet in a very, very rustic way.
The pineapple.
Yeah. So this, Tristan, this is part of making Barbados rum. I could never do the XO if I didn't have that. Anything we've tasted, and because we have 10 different expressions of this. And you know what I've decided? And the team in Barbados totally in. And Angelique and marketing was like, I don't think so. I want to make this available. I think there's people out there, and that's what I was saying. I want a label probably to say, don't buy this unless you know what it is, because it's just a strange animal for somebody who's never been there. But imagine this. Remember we say it should be rumming? Even, you have a drink and, you just want like that extra rumminess. Boom, you put like a teaspoon of that.
If that, it's hot sauce.
It's gonna burst
ketchup
out of flavors.
Yeah, I think especially, like you say, for sort of some tiki cocktails where you just need that little more rumminess to it. Yeah. And of course, in the glass like this is not really, drinking it like this is kind of insane. But as a supplement, as a little lifter, as it's like, oh, we just need to tweak this slightly. We almost need a pipette instead of a lid. Yeah.
That's what we're going to do, the little thing where you can actually measure it. But, a teaspoon, bar spoons at the times, you can actually do a lot of things with it. And if you water it, you'll see.
I'm going to try diluting with a lot of water.
Yeah, do that. You'll see that you're going to get, like, there are many different flavors depending on the concentration. So, but the flavor will still be there. So I just thought about
pineapple.
Right in your nose, right?
Oh, yeah.
You know what I like to do? I've tasted, as a master blender, we taste usually 80, 60 barrels a day. And at the end of the day, you got friends over. Are you having another cocktail, 2 other cocktails? And my doctor is saying, if you want to be doing this for another, I want to retire 30 years from now. It's like for another 30 years. Yeah, these 3 cocktails maybe should be just one. And so I would make my own ginger beer and use like 2 teaspoons of the Hogo Monster. And it's rumming.
Yeah, you're going to taste rum.
And it's rumming.
But you're not drinking much alcohol.
Yeah. And so I just thought there's so many applications. And so I know there was a big debate in the distillery, and I would never do something. The team, remember, this is, I'm tending the distillery, I'm not. And so some of the team is like, no, we should never release this. And so we waited a few years until everybody agreed.
Why? What was the pushback?
Because this is our secret, and you can do so much. It's like giving special powers. Somebody buys this, you got special powers.
I got you.
Remember, Germans used to make rum with neutral alcohol with this. And they're like, will people still buy our rum? It's like, believe me, they will. Once you go into this is, you're giving somebody special powers. Sure. It's like these Marvel movies. You're like, I guess, okay, now you're going to be, having these special powers. So I just thought you would appreciate it.
I do appreciate it. It's amazing. So
it's your bottle, by the way.
Thanks very much. Thank you. No, it is... I reckon it's going to take me a while to get through that, but I just think it's rum sauce effectively.
Yeah.
It's like a little bit in there, a little bit in there. That intensity of aroma and taste, though, is just something else.
Well, there's something, we, like I said, and I really celebrate this. I do love, remember we talked about law of handle in Barbados at Distillery, we say it's rumming. A digger is another guy, and it's like, instead of like say, go be happy, it's like, keep on rumming. And I love that. And I think we should all be keeping on rumming and making these spirits, that we haven't gone through the whole range.
No.
But for example, Stiggins, this is Dave Wondrich calling me and saying pineapple rum was a delicacy in the UK. Charles Dickens was crazy about it. I have a patent from 1824. Please make it. So what did I do? I tasted pineapple for 3 months. I didn't know anything about pineapple. There's a guy in France that trades pineapple. We call him Mr. Pineapple, the people in the trade. And he sent me a case of pineapples, and we settled for the Victoria pineapple. And we distill the skin of the pineapple, and we blend with the flesh.
Yes.
And we created Stiggins. So that's part of the heritage. Also, I'm going to show you this. The Curacao, we're going back to the orange dry Curacao. So that's kind of a staple for the history of the bar. So to me, this is what we wake up in the morning, Tristan. It's just to be able to say, and that transparency. Remember the discussion we had. If we only have a Saccharomyces yeast, I cannot do this. I'm going to kill the tradition. Some people say we should simplify, we should ache, whiskey, who's doing just Saccharomyces. And say, no way, man. You had the Australian in the 1800s who went into the trouble to go to Barbados and Jamaica and get some yeast and bring it back. and make delicious rums, because they said we're going to be. Binley's used to use this Schizosaccharomyces yeast. I bought a few barrels they had to do a single vintage Planteray. So we need to preserve this heritage, and that's not me talking. I'm talking in the name of my team. I'm just a voice, right now. And if you go to Barbados, they would tell you, better than I would tell you. And for me, it is humbly, it's an inspiration. I'm a creative. I want to push the limits, doing that. Do we get in trouble once in a while? Of course, if you create, but it's worth it. I mean, tell me if it's not when you taste it. I want to take the taste buds to new lands every time you taste something. And that's what we do with Planteray. But there's no great spirits without great culture or understanding of the culture. And it's a community. The team likes to say Barbados takes a village to make a great rum. I so agree. I grew up in a village of 70 people. So when they tell me this, it resonates. It takes a village to make a great rum. And so if you don't understand this and don't respect this, you can't make a great rum. And that's why in Barbados, we have a farm. We grow yam. We grow yam to regenerate the land. And the team said, you grow yam, and I grew potatoes in the farm. And it's funny because my grandfather, when he got very sick, he said, remember two things: no potato, no cattle. And because, it was very, 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 no money in it. And so when the team says, we grow cane, we've researched cane varieties about making cane juice rums but the cane, not for the sugared cane, for the flavor of the rum. And Barbados has the sugarcane breeding station, the one that saved the day about cane in the late 1800s. When you go to Barbados, everybody who goes needs to have that $2 bill with Bovell on it that paid tribute to a freed slave that was a genius that was called Mr. Hopper. And so Barbados, all that community, I'm telling you about that community that is creating these beautiful spirits. And we just, want to be part of that community making these products. That's why when we talk about the GISR, you have to make sure that these communities they get to speak and tell you what they think. The people who've been making it for all these years, and they're respected, and they continue making what is their art. And the idea of rum is not to try to be whiskey, is not to try to be cognac. It's got so much, it doesn't need to be like somebody else, And I think it's the same with cognac, and it's the same with gin. And the work we did with all these spirits and this little baby here, the dry curacao. The dry curacao, when we made this, I'm finalizing the 1840 with Dave Wondrich. And David is there, and I'm showing him I love citrus, personally, because they're a vector of flavor. Adam and Eve, I don't think she gave him an apple. She probably gave him some kind of citrus or some kind of funky.
There's rumors that it was a citrus fruit. Yeah,
I'm sure she did. I mean, an apple is cool, but think about the citrus, the flavor elements, and they distill so well. So I showed him, and he said, Alexandre, we need a true curacao, not a sweeter one. We need like a dry curacao that uses the La Haha orange. And David, and I said, it's funny, I read some stuff. Let me send you recipes. 80 pages later of recipes from, David. And I'm like, I'm going to make this. And we really worked, distilled the skin. Mise en valeur, we use infused prune in it. Now, there's some crazy stuff to bring forward the flavors. And we created that curacao. And that was a beautiful process. And when we're finished, David says, this is going to be in every good bars, but you need to be affordable. And when I looked at the price, he tells me it should be, because he loves the bar community and that to be empowered with the right tools. I do too. I said, David, there's nothing left for the bottle. And he said, let's find the cheapest bottle. So we found a little square,
cool bottle, though.
fully recycled,
I like the
very
cap,
light,
the bottle.
400
I love the label.
grams. And to make it a little fancy, we put the label on the side.
That's cool.
But that's why it looks like that. And that little bottle took a life of its own.
No, it's great. It's great. What do you... I mean, look, we've talked through so many different things you've done. We've gone through Citadelle, we've gone through Planteray, and obviously Maison Ferrand, the cognac, and all the little innovations that you've talked about, rejuvenating stills and high-ester rums. You must be working on some really interesting things right now. So what are you maybe you're not going to want to give too much away, but what are you excited about for the next 5 or 10 years?
There's a lot. My wife, Debbie, she has never a dull day. And I said, didn't you buy into this? She says, I did, but sometimes it's on steroid. I said, it's, again, a shared mission. So, for us, we're looking at cognac. We produce our own grapes, and we got extra grapes, and so there's a lot of beautiful things we can do with this. So stay tuned. There's going to be something with that beautiful, and high acidity grapes is beautiful stuff that we're going to be doing this with this. We've been at it for 4 years. I created cut and dry. It took us, the rum with real coconuts took us 4 years to get it right. So it takes a while. We think that's really important. Also continuing fixing our old stills, we always reinvest. So you'll see Gaylord building back some of these stills that we have. So you'll hear about that for sure. For us, it's really important. Continuing to explore, Navy rum. We created Mr. Fogg. I think we just scratched the surface, because everybody's saying, okay, what is Navy rum? I will admit something to you, Tristan. What I thought I knew about every Navy rum, 90% of it was wrong. And I thought I knew enough. And that's why that being very candid and being like, why is going to take us places. So we'll continue to do that. And these partnerships with this distillery, remember Planteray, it's not just us with our distillery. I'm so honored when we finally, got married with the distillery or purchased the team. I got few distilleries. I'm thinking Perla Perdomo from Belize. I love that distillery. They do a great job. The Belize Planteray is delicious.
I've tried some of your Belize. It's really good.
Delicious. And she calls me and she says, so I guess that's it, Alexandre. I said, that's it. Why? She says, so we won't be working anymore together. I said, why? You're mad at me, Perla? It's like, you just bought a distillery. No. But we're going to continue doing this. She says, you got all the rum. This is an incredible distillery. She says, my great-grandfather used to buy rum from States because it was the best rum there was before we bought our own distillery. That's why they're called travelers. People would travel to Belize and buy that bottle. I'm like, no. I want to continue working together. I work very well with the team. Also Fiji is a beautiful story. Another adventure is Paraguay. Paraguay, because it's landlocked, was never flooded by all these American oak barrels. So they still use their local woods. Incienso, and for example, so that's magical. Also, they still boil the juice to create skimming. Skimming rum doesn't exist since the late 1800s in people's mind, but they do.
Way back, that's how they used
but
to do.
they do. You're right. So that's gonna be, you're gonna see more and more Paraguay expressions. And so yes, it would be easier to just work with our own distillery, but I learn every time so much. And we have this agreement with partner distilleries where we say, you know what, everything we know, we're gonna share with you. And every cost we have, we're going to tell you what it costs. And if you feel that can help you, like we buy barrels, this is my cost. I'm right now with Pepe from Puerto Rico, and I'm helping him buying barrels, for example. So I'm going to see him in a couple of weeks. And so yeah, these things I think are the future, and then you'll see more expressions about what we do. I don't plan to do, people ask me, you're French, there's more and more French whiskey. I don't plan to do French whiskey for one simple reason, because it defines who we are. If we feel that if we make something, it has to have a message. There's a message in that bottle. If you take, you got the message, right?
I got the message loud and clear,
You got the message.
Still the message is still hanging around.
The 1840, and you like it or you don't. It's not my privilege. It's your privilege. And I want to thank all the bartenders who trust us around the world, and the people who are all the Planteray addicts, who trust us. They put pressure on us, to be there and do the best. But we wake up in the morning for these beautiful moments we do together. What you do also, Tristan, is so important, because there's no appreciation without knowledge, both at production level, but also at consumer level.
Absolutely.
So knowledge is key. So that's the journey. And also some impressive, scary moments when we changed the name from Plantation to Planteray. Was a very scary moment to us. I can tell you in a nutshell, I called it that way. To me, there was plantation meant to farm. And of course, I got to, realize words are very stigmatic, and create stigmas. And a few people were very important to me. First and foremost was the team at the distillery. Barbados is a very, very nice culture. And that was not a conflictual, was very like, let's sit down. Third of the distillery was like, no, we work together, we do so well, this is a first world problem. The 2/3 said, no, this is very, to us, it's, if you ask us. And I heard about stories. There was a gentleman also called Marc who was a preacher actually in Barbados. He's in charge of government for sugar and rum. And it was not a spiritual journey as much as a cultural journey. And to say there's a Barbados plantation slave code. It's from the 1600s. You should read it. He says it's on internet, and you should read it. It's just not good. And so it's like, you know, and then somebody important also in America, I know to him, was...
And then did that change your perspective on the word plantation?
Oh, for sure, man. I mean, there's no other way. And so suddenly it's not just a farm, you know, and then, you know, and I'm not that stupid. I had heard, but it was not like that in your face. And somebody important and not to him was Garrett Oliver at Brooklyn Brewery. And Garrett, you know, as you know, is from African descent and, you know, incredible man. And he told me about this. And one day, long story short, he calls me, he's back from Japan, and he said, I thought about you when I was in Japan. The distillery is owned now, partly owned by a Japanese brewery, and he's presenting to the board. And he had worked on a special brew with our good friend Dave Wondrich, and they worked on it in the finalization in Manhattan. And next slide on his PowerPoint presentation, new name for that range. In Japan, he said, I thought the name was super catchy, the Manhattan Project. And I don't know if you saw Oppenheimer.
Whoa.
And he said, you know, to me, yeah, I'm American, but I should have thought about it. But to me, it was a project from Manhattan. I'm in Japan.
Yeah, that might be a bit more sensitive to that. Yeah.
So, of course, you know, in Japan, it's this destruction.
Hiroshima.
So really, in the... and he said, the first person I thought about you is about a name and so that was kind of like the last, because I went back to Barbados. I go every month for a week. I live in Barbados a week every month, and we talked with the team again, and it was very heart to heart, and I was like, whoa, and they're like, yeah, and so and it's funny because that was a big decision, and we made it. And were we scared? Absolutely. It's like renaming your child. And you know, we don't belong to a group. This is our own. And even the people at the distillery, everybody was scared because we do well together. But, you know, did we did what I think? I don't know. We think we did. But if somebody thinks differently, I will respect them. But we think we did. There was no other way. You know, in the Gaelic culture, the ancestors of my country in France, when things, if you look at Asterix, you think the sky's going to fall on our head. We thought the sky could fall on our head. It didn't. And I want to thank everybody who stuck with us. And, you know, I always remember this moment. Marc Hill, I was with him actually last weekend also. You know, the man that helped in my journey in Barbados in a very Barbadian way. When we announced it, he shook my hand, big guy, big hands, and he said, Planteray is a strong name. Don't you ever forget about it. And I tell you with emotion, because I needed that pat on the back for sure. And that's what we did. And so that was that. Why Planteray? The plant is a cane, you know, the plant and the sun, the ray. And cane and sun is delicious rum. So that's what we did. So, you know, thanks for everybody to hang on, you know, because that was a defining moment. I was not prepared for this. I'm prepared for rain, frost, growing different stuff, making yam, growing cane, distilling it. I was not prepared for this, and hopefully that's for the next 200 years.
I hope so too. And well, let's toast to delicious rum.
Absolutely.
And onwards.
Thank you, man. And thank you, Tristan. It's a great pleasure. Thank you.
Alexandre Gabriel, thank you so much.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure. Thank you.